Okay, thank you.
If you're not aware, it's being transcribed in summary.
Right, welcome to the July 23rd, 2026 workshop of the Tennessee Public Charter School Commission. A link has been provided on the commission website for the public to view this meeting. Today, the commission will hear a panel discussion featuring commission school operators discussing processes, challenges, and opportunities related to charter school facilities. I'd like to recognize our Director of Authorizing, Beth Figueroa, to begin today's program.
Thank you so much, Chair Richards, and good afternoon and welcome to today's panel on charter schools facilities in Tennessee. I appreciate you all joining us. I'm going to be facilitating today's discussion. As mentioned, we are here today to talk about facilities. This is a topic that we discuss quite frequently, especially as we look through new start applications and the opening of new schools. But even though we talk about this at a really high level, we felt it would be really beneficial to dive a little bit deeper into what is actually a very complex issue for our charter schools, as well as it's one of the critical levers for student equity and school viability. And so the reality on the ground right now is incredibly difficult for operators, whether they're new operators or experienced. And so challenges include everything from funding challenges, limited real estate inventory, as well as just the struggles and difficulties for securing capital. And so today we're going to get deeper into this topic. And to unpack this, I am joined by some of our exceptional school leaders that are within our portfolio, who are going to be able to tell us a little bit more about their challenges that they experience on a day-to-day basis. And so to begin today's discussion, I want to have each of our school operators introduce themselves, just briefly share your school and network, highlight your region that you're located in, as well as a brief just introduction about your experience in facilities. And so I'm going to begin with Randy Dowell from KIPP School.
Hey everybody, this is Randy Dowell. I'm the founder and executive director of KIPP Nashville. We operate 10 schools, 10 charter schools, kinder through 12th grade, 5 in the commission, 5 in MNPS, the local district. We educate over 4,000 students, and last year we earned a collective 3.6 as our GPA across our schools on the state's report card. So we're excited about that. We own and lease buildings. We have built facilities. We raise a lot of money to facilitate that and make that happen. And I'm excited to talk to you all about all of those things and those processes through this workshop. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Randy. How about you, Drew, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hey everybody, I'm Drew Sipple. I'm the CEO of Capstone Education Group. We run 4 schools on 3 campuses in Memphis. We've had just about every facility experience you can have. We've shared space with a church. We've shared space with a district school. We've made offers on completely empty buildings. We've made offers on underutilized buildings. We've made offers on buildings we have. We've leased space, and we've made offers for buildings for renovation. So we've had just about every experience you can have. I'm glad to share with you today.
Wonderful. Jay, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Jay Renfro. I'm the Executive Director of Tennessee Nature Academy. Our unique contribution to this conversation is we're a single site charter school, and we're still expanding. So we're relatively young in the process, entering our 4th year as a school. We're incubating in an incubator site in Davidson County in an older mega church, and we're currently navigating the lending woes as we look to build our future forever home.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Okay. We also have another operator who is currently working to get on. And so if he joins us, his name is Dr. Eric Daly. He is with Rocketship Schools. We'll have him introduce himself, but we see him trying to get in, so we will add him as we are able to. So for the panel, I'm going to begin by asking questions specifically of our school operators that is meant to have them share out a little bit more about their hands-on experience with facilities. And then at the conclusion of kind of our questions and answers, we're then going to open it up for you all to ask questions directly of the school operators. And so my first question for today is focused on school facility funding and the realities around financing. We know that facilities behind personnel is one of schools' most expensive and largest items. And so our questions today are specifically focused on that. So my first question is for Randy from KIPP. And so when we look at the financial landscape for public charter schools in Tennessee, as well as the operational realities, they often require a lot of balancing for you all as schools. And so how do you manage the tension between meeting long-term facility needs, as well as making sure that you keep your resources focused within the classrooms? And what does that balance look like in reality?
Yeah, we have been for a long time now, a couple of decades, raising money and building a fundraising apparatus, which has been incredibly, originally it wasn't there to support facilities costs, but there's a massive disparity in funding between local district-run schools and charter schools in the city. So district-run schools, on average, the city is funding those schools at about $2,000 to $3,000 a year for capital expenses, so capital investments. That just goes to the students who do not attend charter schools in the public school system. So about $2,000 to $3,000 a year there. We have a currently $450 allocation within TISA that, as more charter schools come online and more students come online in the state, that number will shrink because it's not set at $450. It's set at a pot of money that then is distributed across all charter school students. So between $450 a student is what we receive for facilities, and that's from the state, which is, we're thankful for it. Our competitors here, the local traditionally run districts, the city is putting in $2,000 to $3,000 a year. So that gap between $450 and $2,000 to $3,000, just call it $2,500. So there's about a $2,000 gap between for facility funding between a KIPP Nashville student and a public school student down the street. So we don't raise that much money, but we've got to be creative with financing. We've got to be creative with development. What we realized a long time ago is that when you're building schools in the part of town that has declining enrollment, it's possible to rent an unused school building. The problem there is that it's got declining enrollment and there are fewer students there. So to be in parts of town, like currently I'm in Antioch, an area that's growing, it's growing rapidly. We've had to take out about $100 million in loans over the course of a decade to build facilities that then we've filled, and they now have wait lists. And so it's all working out very well. And for a charter school or a network of charter schools that's not raising money, it'd be very difficult to do what we've done and what we're doing. And we'd like to do more. We'd like to build more facilities for more opportunities for our kids, both for more seats and also, the city is investing heavily and has been for the last 6 years in sports fields and things like that. We are currently building what I believe is the only full-size, or maybe it's the second full-sized soccer field that will be owned by or leased by a charter school in Davidson County. We're building it right now. So there's a huge disadvantage on the facility side, and when we're competing for students, that we're attacking. And I think it's important that we all look at that and realize, okay, I think the entire charter sector has to find a way to do more to continue to compete. We've competed on almost purely academic term, just like grounds over the first couple of decades. I think the next couple of decades, we're going to have to do more to offer more holistic learning opportunities, arts, athletics, things like that for students, as our competition helps our districts and surrounding schools get better, and as they compete with these bigger facilities, war chests that are not accessible to our teams and our students.
Absolutely. And so my next question then, I'll have Jay kind of take the first pass at this, but then also feel free to hop in if you have anything. Randy, you mentioned the financing that you've had to secure for facilities, and that's something that Tennessee Nature Academy is also working through. So securing capital with national lenders, they are looking at schools' finances pretty closely and making sure that schools are in a strong financial position from an underwriting lens. And so if you can share a little bit about just the challenges, the realities when it comes to securing funding, specifically when you're looking to take out a loan, a bond, etc.
So when we're talking to banks or CDFIs, really the conversation is ultimately around risk. And we're, as I mentioned, a single site, slow growth, young charter school. The commissions has a rising number of these schools in its portfolio. So this is something that we're all going to be figuring out at one point or another, because there is some inherent risk to a school that doesn't have the backing of a network. And so that conversation comes up quite a bit, but they're looking at financial metrics. Some of them are looking at academic metrics. Some of them are looking at other areas that they would determine risks. And sometimes seeing their standards can be a bit of a black box, and there's a bit of uncertainty of what they're looking for. And sometimes we see contradictory standards to between the lenders and between some of our goals. And so I'll run through just some of the things we've heard from lenders as reasons why we would be a risky school and reasons why they would not be excited to lend to us. One of them is just looking at our student demographics and populations. We have a rising number, a slightly higher than usual number of students with disabilities and a rising number of students with disabilities. We think that's a wonderful thing. Tennessee Nature Academy wants to attract those students. We want to retain those students, and we do a good job of that. There's some inherent risk to a financial model with rising special education costs and some perceived risks potentially to the academics of the school with a rising number of students with disabilities. So I could foresee other charter schools in the commission's portfolio, especially as opportunity schools join the mix, where the metrics of the goal of the mission of the school don't always match with what a lender or what an underwriter is looking at as far as those risks. We've been told just, hey, you're doing everything right. We just want to see a few more years of sustained enrollment growth. And in the same breath, they said, but we don't want to support splitting the campus, or we don't want to fund a phased approach to the facility. So we're kind of boxed in of like, well, we can't grow forever in our incubator space. So what are we to do? And then simultaneously, we'll hear from another lender that have we ever considered not growing and just stabilizing until we get the financing and then moving and then growing? And so that would look very differently in our financial model. And if we came back to the commission and said, we're actually going to stop all of our student enrollment growth. And so it's hard to, it's often a very tangled knot to untie, because we are held accountable in so many different ways. And we're also looking at being held accountable to the lenders' often murky criteria.
That's really helpful context, especially as we think about new charter school applications, single site operators versus the I don't want to say advantage, but in some ways the advantage of a larger network or a more mature, longer standing network. Anything else that you would add to that, Randy or Drew, when it comes to financing before we move into kind of our next set of questions?
The only thing I would add is, when you can get financing, it's great. Because then you can build your building or, add capacity to your building. We do end up then competing. I mean, here at KIPP Nashville, we receive equal operating funds compared to the district, but because of their capital funding advantage, and because our financing requires us to pay those debt payments, we're putting about 9 out of every $10 on the field in the classroom towards teachers' salaries compared to the district. So we're a little, once you get the financing, you need it to build your building. You need it to operate. And once you're in that world, the structure, we end up at a funding disadvantage that's pretty significant, when we compete with the district. Now we still go after it and are having a lot of success, but we'd like to be able to do even more. And if we could find a way to level that out.
One thing I would add too, we were looking for multiple spaces at one time, and some of the funding options would have worked for one facility, but because of the covenants, it would have prohibited you to be able to do the other two. So there was a point where we felt like to build one facility was going to mean we're going to have to close two. So sometimes the covenants and the restrictions are so tight, it boxes you in from being able to grow or do other things with your existing schools.
That's all super helpful to talk through and understand. And so, of course, a lot of these questions were based on you already having a facility, but I'm going to transition us now to talk about just the challenges of, first and foremost, even finding a facility to locate at. And so my first question is going to be to Drew, and then Jay, I would love for you to add on any additional information. But Drew, I think you have a really unique perspective to lend here. You've successfully secured multiple permanent school buildings. And for you all, some of them were previously owned by the school district, but you've also had to navigate the process of temporary incubation space, retrofitting that, et cetera. And so looking across all of those experiences, what are some key takeaways that you can share with us about some of those hurdles, timelines, costs? What can we learn from that very unique experience that you've had?
Yeah, thanks for being positive and saying they're unique. So it was difficult. We were looking for space for a school authorized by the commission. And so we had authorization, and we were set to buy a building that was owned by the district. It was empty. It was for sale. And we went through the process. We offered more than the appraisal, and they just decided not to sell it to us. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but that put us in a scramble. And so as we began to look at space, we began to see that if we were going to renovate space, there were so many things that we would have to do to renovate space that wouldn't be true if we were able to buy that school from the district. And so one of those in Memphis was the storm shelter. And so there was a requirement that we don't have for existing school buildings that we have for new buildings if you renovate. And roughly for us to put that in place was going to be about $3 million above the purchase price to reinforce the building to meet that code. And so that was a deal killer for us. Like, it was already expensive enough. But as we talked with the contractor, he said, well, there's this other option, and it's roughly $1.5 million. And you just put this thing on the back of your parking lot. You never use it. You build it out there to meet the code, but it is a total waste of every single penny. But it's less expensive than $3 million that you put into your building. So what we began to see is that if we could buy an existing school building, then the transition in and the cost of it was dramatically less than trying to replicate that same building through the renovation, because of the things you would have to put in place that weren't in place in an existing school building. We also began to run into time pressure. Some of the grandfathered opportunities in an existing school building had a limit on time from the last time they were used as a school building. So we felt this time pressure that we need you to sell this building to us within this window, or we're going to lose all these grandfathered things. So if you're underneath the window, you can move in as it is. If you miss the window, then there's millions of dollars of things you have to do. And obviously that just didn't make sense to us. and became a deal killer on the renovation and became a time pressure on the buildings we were trying to get in. We also made offers on a building that was just completely empty, and they just wouldn't sell it to us. And so, when we would go and look and say, okay, if we can buy this building at the appraisal and call it $2 million, to build one just like it for us was going to be $18 million. And so that just was cost prohibitive. Or if we did it for one, we'd have to shut down the other two schools. So there's a time issue. There's kind of a grandfathered issue that are not consistent. There are things you have to do in terms of making a building ready if you want to use an existing building that are not necessarily consistent, whether you're starting from scratch, grandfathered, or already in a building. And so that made it really hard to find all those things to line up when you're looking for a place to start. And of course, you're trying to do it in a specific neighborhood. So the number of options are so small that fit all of those hurdles. So it's super frustrating. We did eventually, we were able to buy the buildings that we're in, but it was a long process of hearing no. We'd been in a building for years, and we still didn't have the right to buy it. And at one point, we thought we're gonna have to shut the school down because they won't sell us the building we've been in solely for 10 years. So there's kind of this combination of the district available buildings that you can't purchase. I would also say an empty school building that's already been purchased by the district for public schools should be available to someone who's going to run a public school without having to buy it a second time. So that was a feeling we had. It's like, why are we paying again? The taxpayers already paid for it once for public education. We're going to put public education in an empty building, but we have to pay for it again. And so there were a number of different hurdles that make it hard, even when you're authorized, to be able to open.
I certainly remember a lot of phone calls with you, Drew, as you worked through all of the roller coaster. But again, congratulations on securing those facilities. And then Jay, would love to also hear a little bit from your perspective. You were able to get a location at a church as a temporary space, but you've also had to do some retrofitting to make it work for you all. And so would love to hear your experience.
We hit the jackpot as far as incubator facilities go. There was a large church within our community that had a massively declined membership, and it was built to be a private school. So the classroom infrastructure was there. It has an awesome forest, which is really important to me in our model. And so all of the bones were there, but we had a very difficult time bringing things up to codes, and a lot of that was with working with the fire marshal there. And I understand the fire marshal has a tough job. There was not maybe enough accountability or oversight on this particular fire marshal. He would come and give us a punch list. Each punch list would be $20,000 to $40,000 more in fixing things up. He would come back, he would check that off, he would give us another punch list. This actually extended over a year and a half, and I'm sure he came 6 to 8 times, each time $20,000 to $40,000 more, until we essentially said, you've been here, you keep finding new things, you keep putting more things on our list. We think this is inappropriate, and we need to bring in your supervisor. And then all of a sudden everything disappeared off the list, and we were good to go. And so for us to have to fight with the codes official was not something I was expecting. That was a learning curve for me. I'm sure some members on this call, maybe you've squared off with fire marshal after fire marshal. But that was really expensive, and we had that tap into our operating budget, and it was again something that we're looking to start a school. We have a time crunch. We can't fight with the fire marshal, or we can't fight with the codes person. The truth about a lot of the codes is that they can be open to interpretation, and there can be not ways around it, but ways to work with what you currently have. And I wish there had been somebody to help us through that process, or to give some oversight or a way through, because there was a lot of time and a lot of money that ultimately was taken away from kids as we were starting in year one and beyond.
So Jay, you talked about the very fortunate situation you all fell into finding a facility right away. But how about, I know Randy, you all have had to work through just inventory shortages, especially, I mean, we see schools expanding into Rutherford County. You're in that southeastern quadrant of Nashville. And so if you can talk about what type of creative approaches maybe you have been able to take as far as finding a viable pathway to secure facilities, specifically in areas that are just experiencing rapid growth and really little inventory.
Yeah, well, I'm speaking with you all from, I think, what used to be the men's department at the Hickory Hollow Macy's down in Antioch. We I think we got lucky with timing. Is probably the headline. The other big headline is school systems don't have empty facilities in the places where they're experiencing growth, student growth. So when we started building schools in Antioch, which is fast growing student population, we realized that we would have to buy land, buy buildings, build our own buildings. So we've done a little bit of both. Starting about a decade ago, we bought our first 30-acre plot of land. We've built 2 buildings on that. We have, over 1,000 students on that campus. We then, I think, just got very lucky with timing and very fortunate with being, the way things came together, being able to work with the city, with a former mayor to untangle a bunch of operating agreements here at this old mall. We bought the Macy's. The city ended up buying, I think, the Sears and the main portion of the mall. They're demolishing now the main portion of the mall. Yeah, and then we also have purchased and hold a piece of land for future expansion, which we may or may not use. We're not sure exactly how to use it, but we realized through this process that it's hard to find land, so we need to be aggressive, thoughtfully so.
Excellent. And then now, before we open it up to time for commissioners to ask questions, I want to pivot us to authorizing. That's what we are here. We are charter school authorizers. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about things that are within our control to help support you all as schools as you locate facilities, find facilities, go through our rigorous pre-opening process. And so this next question, I'll let you go, Jay. And then if anybody else wants to fill in, I know that you could all probably talk for hours about this specific topic, but as school leaders, your primary focus is to be instructional leaders and you're looking for outcomes for students. However, facility projects, when they're underway, or maybe they're not necessarily underway, but they're in the incubation stage, they take away from your team's daily bandwidth. And so what does that strain mean for you all as school leaders? How can we all support you as you are kind of pulled in multiple different directions as you undergo these types of projects?
It's essentially another part-time job on top of other roles. And so for a small team like myself, we had we have a very we started in 2023, we had 2 leaders in our executive leadership team. And so for us to focus on all the academics and the compliance and the operations and everything that all the meat and potatoes of a school, that's so wonderful. And then to have the facilities scenarios and walking with the fire marshal, looking at the funding, looking at the codes, look at all of that is an additional stretch. And I don't know what the solution is, but I know that everybody experiences it. And it's also what I've learned is a very specialized expertise. So you get people in education, and they may be expertise in finance, and they may be expertise in operations, even in the education space. But real estate and the financial modeling that's required for a complex loan is not something that's typically in the wheelhouse of somebody who's working in education. And so you end up outsourcing that talent, which is what we've done, outsourcing that talent to where you have some consultants and some partners. The challenge there is that those consultants and partners are working with the same lenders on dozens of projects. And so their skin is not in the game like ours is. They can say, the lenders are saying you need to wait another year, and they don't understand what that means for us on the ground level as far as trying to find space where it doesn't exist. So it's a very real challenge that stretches us operationally. I can't imagine what it will be like to be in a facility and not have that lift. And I look forward to the day. But you asked how the authorizers can help us through that. They've been extremely helpful. I remember the pre-opening checklist where they helped help us look around the corner a little bit to some of those items that they knew we needed that hadn't landed on our list yet. And so I felt nothing to support from y'all. So I want to say thank you for that.
Thank you. How about you, Drew or Randy? Anything you would add about just the time commitment, the lift of facility searches, facility renovations?
Yeah, for us, one of the things that could be helpful from a legislative standpoint is, and I think we've made a little progress recently, but we spent so much time investigating district-owned, for sale buildings and go through the process exactly what we're supposed to, make the offer above what they were asking, and then to be said, like, we're just not going to sell it, never mind. So that is an incredible frustration for us, is to have wasted all that time for a building that was clearly for sale. So I think having clarity on what the opportunities are for district buildings that are either underutilized or not utilized at all, I think would have saved us a ton of time, because then you just know either don't go after those, or you know if you do, you can. Because we'd end up doing that, then time has gone by. That would be the other thing, is like getting a response. Really, it's not a priority for them because the buildings underutilized are open. And like we're saying here, like, we're under time pressure. Like, so if it's no, tell me it's no. But I can't go start to buy another building and then you come back and tell me yes. So some parameters around that would really help us, I think.
And then my last question to you all is, we are quickly approaching our New Start appeals timeline. And so the timeline between an October vote on a school and an August school opening that following year is incredibly tight. And some of you on this call have lived this firsthand. There's very, very little room for delays, hiccups, whether it be facilities or anything else. And so when uncontrollable real estate hurdles or construction delays pop up, how does having access to a delayed start or that flexibility with a temporary incubation space and us understanding and offering that flexibility impact the school's long-term success? I'll start with you, Drew, if you want to start the question off.
Yes, we'd have one less school if you guys hadn't worked with us. So the one where I said we made an offer on an existing empty building was kind of right along the same time that we got approved. And so it was going to be a great transition in timing and cost, and it was going to work great. And then all of a sudden they said, we're not going to sell you the building. So now we have to scramble around. We don't have enough time to renovate something totally that we know will work. So then you start to think about spending, $2, $3, $4 million to survive 2 years that's going to be wasted if you can find it. Or you realize, like, we're just going to have to shut down. And so when I called and said, like, we certainly can't open, we've looked at every space, we can't open on the original timeline. You guys did two things that were unbelievably helpful and are the reason we're still open. One is you said you can delay. So that gave us more time to look. But really, maybe the biggest one was you said we were going to start K2, and that's what you authorized. And I asked if we could just start with K, because then it opens up some temporary facilities, because I just need a certain number of classrooms. And because we were able to open with K, we were eventually found a place that was being run as a pre-K. It had enough classrooms to last 2 years. And so we were able to launch during that time. When we were in that building, we were able to secure, a forever home, we hope. So the fact that you would be flexible on timing, and that you would be flexible on our opening number of students was just a game changer for us. And so we're really grateful for that. And, we're eventually going to have a pre-K 8 school because you allowed us to delay and open with just K, not our original plan.
And then Randy, anything you would add to that?
Yep, I was just coming off mute. Yeah, we similarly benefited from the commission's flexibility. Our original plan for the last 3 schools that we opened, we call them Global Elementary, Middle, and High School. They were the elementary and middle schools were, well, actually all 3 of them were supposed to be about twice as big as they currently are. We realized in 2021 that real estate costs had gone up so dramatically and the cost of construction had risen so quickly that we were not going to be able to afford, and our board didn't want to take out what looked like it would be about another $50 million in loans. So we asked the commission, talked to Tess, and proposed opening with smaller footprints so that we could fit all of the schools in this one building and fill that building much more quickly in order to help with our payments as well. So that's all worked out really well, and parents actually love it. Staff loves it. So it's working. We at some point we would like to grow them. We got to be thoughtful about how to do that, but we've definitely appreciated the flexibility and the spirit of partnership from Tess and the team and from the entire commission to help us navigate these the bumps in the road to get where we're going.
Thank you for sharing, and that's certainly helpful. And I know even from the team that helps you all with pre-opening, I would say a significant amount of our time is spent supporting with facilities. So thank you all so much for the insight that you've shared. And so at this point, I want to take what time we have for commissioners to ask questions of these operators. Yeah, so the floor is all yours to ask questions.
Anybody with questions? Well, I would just like to ask one. When you talk about putting forth legislation that will put some parameters around use of underutilized or in fact vacant school buildings, do you think that can be done on a statewide basis, or do we face so much of it being local questions that it has to be pushed at a district level to make it workable? I'll take an answer from anybody.
I think it can be done on a statewide basis. I think that can also be gamed locally, with reluctant implementation. I think if I go a level up and kind of look at what we're trying to accomplish, I don't think access to empty buildings, at least in Nashville, is particularly helpful at this point, because the empty buildings are in places where there's already tremendous competition for students and there's declining student populations. Places like where Jay is down the street, where there are more students moving in and growing, there are no empty buildings. The empty buildings are 20 miles away in the wrong part of town for charter operators to launch. So anyone who opens with an empty building from the local school system in Nashville, I would say I wish them good luck, and it's going to be a big struggle because they're going to have to shuttle a lot of kids across the city.
See, thanks for sharing that. So in Memphis, there would certainly be some of that, but I would also say the opposite is true. Like, we want to go into these neighborhoods where it's hard to serve those kids, and the facilities need work. They're costing a lot of money to maintain for the district. So for us, I think what Randy said is right. We need to know that the local authorities will follow the state law, but it certainly is so easy to delay or to just not respond. And so I think there would need to be an accountability in Memphis. But certainly the three buildings we're in are in neighborhoods where there are empty buildings. Our city's probably going to have some more empty buildings where there's still kids. And so we would love to be able to know we could get into those buildings if we could make the enrollment process work. So we'd love for it to be local and know that they're accountable for that.
Commissioner Griswold.
So I think we all have to acknowledge that Governor Lee clearly has been an advocate. I mean, we're here because of Governor Lee. So we got a new administration coming in. We got a new commissioner of education will be coming in. So what's on your list? What should Hayden be wanting to hear from you all as operators of priorities when we sit down and we're able to work with the new administration and hopefully get them to be just as supportive on charters as the Lee administration has been?
The one thing I would offer is kind of consistency and fairness. If a district is allowed to do a thing, or like Randy said, if they're getting a certain amount of funding, they're just a public school like we're a public school. So whether it's funding or access to buildings, expectations, like we have to be significantly better in many ways than other schools to stay open. And so I think if we felt like the field was level, that would be a big thing for us. The second thing would be, and we're seeing some of this, you guys are doing it, but just the ability to get authorized when a district may not be open to charter schools, for the state to be able to say, like, if we think there's a need and we think you can do it, we're going to make sure you get the opportunity. So to me, those are kind of the two big things that hit my list.
Yeah, I keep thinking of choice and competition as being like really important for kids in Tennessee. So I think continuing to invest in charter schools to ensure that kids have choice is really is vital. I think the commission has proven that it can help to hold districts accountable for making decisions that they don't want to make, that I would argue are in their best interest. But yeah, I do think that the commission is plays an important role, a very important role, and has been helpful in expanding choice for school choice for students across the state. My ask would be increased facility funding specifically for charter schools, grow the TISA allocation by, I think $1,000 more than it currently is. So put it up to $1,500 per student through the TISA formula, and make that recurring. I think that would solve a lot of, or at least allow us to solve a lot of the facilities problems that we're experiencing. And it would also promote better options and better choices, which then raises the experience for all of the students in the state.
I was going to answer with some more expansive facilities funding. The Tennessee Facilities Fund that was just relatively recently passed is a great start. We engaged with the manager of that fund, and we were essentially too risky of a school for them to invest that fund in, and they have extremely high standards. So not telling those people that they have to lower their standards, that's not what we're wanting, but to understand that if we want to expand school choice, one way to do it is to provide that funding for those schools to grow, and not waiting until the school has 8 years, 10 years of an established existence before it can unlock some of that funding. The other, just related specifically and granularly to facility funding, the bond market was out of reach for us. And so I think access to bond rates that traditional public schools have, every, I think, percentage makes the project more affordable by sometimes $1 million. And I know Oklahoma, they had I think they called it a moral obligation bond, and Oklahoma recently did that for charters. So um, pressure in those places, or collaboration in those places, would be huge as far as the expansion of the charter school sector in general.
Follow up on that.
Yeah, Commissioner Levine.
Yeah, you mentioned charter schools getting access to the state bond, I guess bond provisions for getting interest rates at the same level as the states do. How did you mention? I think you mentioned Arkansas did that. How did that work?
I think it was Oklahoma. And admittedly, these are the sorts of things that I outsource to my team. So to go deeper into that, I'm happy to set up a call to dive into that. I know just very much on the surface level. I'm not sure about the mechanics.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to jump in. Keep busy. Randy, I think you mentioned you've raised some or a lot of money in all this capital stuff. And so I'm curious about, and I guess we have access to this. I'd love to see how you put these deals together. I mean, the stack of how these things are paid for. But then specifically, maybe right now, the fundraising that you've done or had success at, is that something that can be shared in the family strategies and how you've done that? Or is some of this specific to KIPP because of the national name and reputation and maybe access to national funders? Or so anyway, are there shared learnings for the rest of the commission schools?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're happy to share everything from our strategy to our tactics and practice around development. We do get some benefit from the national umbrella. There's some national funders who will kick in to fund us for operations and even for some capital projects from time to time. Most of it's coming from local. I think the pinch that we're seeing is that though we do believe that's a growing sector, and there's more potential for giving in Nashville for these projects, we're also hearing some donors asking the question okay, well, how can this is public school, how can this be publicly funded and publicly supported? They understand completely that there's a $2,000 per kid gap right now between what Jay's student or my student receives from the city of Nashville and what the kid at the traditional school down the street receives for facilities funding. So they get that. But yes, we'd love to share any of those things, any of the lessons learned and things that work, et cetera. On the deal front, we've done we've actually had a variety of different lenders. I chuckle because we talked to one of them, Equitable Facility Fund, which is a fund that's exclusively set up to help high-performing charter schools grow, and you all are familiar with them from the Tennessee work. We were one of their first investments almost a decade ago when they first started. Chuckle because we had our annual call with them a few days ago, and they were recounting that story, and I'd forgotten some of the parts of that. So that's one example. We've gotten loans from local banks. We've gone to the bond market directly. Our organization has a BBB+ credit rating. KIPP Nashville does. And that's completely local. That's not national at all. That's just Nashville. And then this most recent build was a bank loan, a sizable bank loan that we put to market and had banks compete on. So it's been a variety of different approaches. The way to think about collateral is what banks are looking for. They want to make sure that we're going to stay enrolled and that we're a safe bet to be enrolled into the future. And then we have a pool of our real estate that serves as collateral.
And that's what Jay shared that makes it difficult that we ran into was we were trying to get funding for our new school, which didn't have enrollment. And so they were going to take all the collateral we had in our other 3 schools just to get one going. And so I don't know if there's a way that you could partner with us with the covenants with the people who are willing to give funding, so it just doesn't choke down the entire organization to try to get one building up and going, especially when you're a fresh start.
Okay, Commissioner Eddie Smith.
So I'm going to ask this question with a caveat that if I am not here tomorrow, you all should start the investigation with either Ashley or Hayden, because I have disappeared overnight. Has there ever been any thought, going back to some of this discussion and taking a page out of the playbook, out of what's happening in Metro Nashville right now, of giving the Charter Commission eminent domain authority to take some of these schools when a local community is playing games of saying, no, we're now not going to sell it because you're a charter school, but they would have sold it to another entity. That's something that we might want to let the legislature investigate, that would give us the ability to support the schools to stop some of these games from happening again. I'm just taking a page out of the playbook of what is already being shown to be an effective playbook out of Metro Nashville that we could employ to serve what is in the best needs of the interests of students in those communities. And you see why I put the caveat on there.
Does anyone have any thoughts on that? We won't make you disappear, I promise.
Everybody is afraid to answer that.
No, I mean, with some of the interesting use of eminent domain across the country, it's not the craziest thing that's ever been proposed, that's for sure. And it's more, I think, a problem in Memphis, which has traditionally been a little bit more cooperative with charters than Metro Nashville. It's frustrating, and I'm well aware of the problems that you guys have faced with them not being willing to sell schools. We went through that with Wooddale. They had put $1 million into a school building, and when they became one of our schools, they wouldn't sell the building to them for a reasonable amount of money, and in fact wanted them to pay for the improvements they'd already made, which defied logic in my mind. But anyway.
There was a school, there was a group in Nashville, I think, that beautiful neighborhood that had a school that had closed. They wanted to convert, I can't remember the name of it, but the local community wanted this, and I don't remember the whole deal, whether they weren't able to acquire it or the local school system wouldn't sell it. I think eminent domain, it's the first I've ever heard that applied here, but we're not talking about private entities here. We're talking about public schools that are closed. It's very much the same concept as what this commission does now, which is if a local school district won't act, we're basically a safety net for applicants who want to be heard objectively. So it's not, it's always, when you hear eminent domain, you always get a little bit nervous about that when you talk about private property. When you talk about a school system that has a public facility that refuses to part with it or is willing to part with it for other purposes when it was meant to be a school, I don't think it's a terrible idea. And I live way up in Northeast Tennessee. They can't get to me.
One thought, maybe just a variation on the theme, would be instead of a eminent domain would be a right of first refusal. So any charter school would have the right, to the extent that the school building was being sold, to step in and actually purchase it for the same price that was being contemplated. That might be a little less threatening way to actually.
I say they've done that. Well, they had that already a state law, and
All right.
districts are
That's a
playing.
big idea.
But anyway, my question was for Jay. I was encouraged by your comment on the Oklahoma bill that just passed into law. I was just doing a couple of quick Google searches and Claude searches to see if I could figure out what it's all about. It seems encouraging. Are you familiar with any other state laws that do something similar? It reminds me a little bit of the SBA loan guarantees in the small business world. So it definitely seems like we should do more work and learn more about what, it looks like the bill just passed in the law this spring. So, but my question to you is whether you're aware of any other states that have anything similar that we should look into.
I'm not right off the cuff. I'm happy to consult with my team and send any research that we have to Beth and the commission staff.
Yeah, that would be helpful. We are putting together our list of work for Hayden for his upcoming legislative session. So this is the time of year where we are actively soliciting input on things that could be useful to our charter school, because we know there are tremendous pressures on you between the decline in enrollment and the increased cost of real estate and buildings. This whole environment has changed markedly in the last 5 years. So feel free to send any suggestions to Beth or Tess, and we will work through them and we will have this discussion. Are there other questions? Lauren?
Thank you all so much for joining. Randy, I have one question for you. You've been doing this 20 years, right? 21. I'd love to hear just kind of how the facilities landscape has changed. Like, where have we made progress? And then now there's the facilities fund. And you know, are there places that it's a lot harder than it used to be? I imagine rising costs. I'd just love to hear from your perspective, like what's changed in the 20 years.
Yeah, that just, I mean, it gave me a flashback to probably 21 years ago when you were walking through our original school and taking notes and interviewing people. And I think one of the big things that's changed is in the early days, everything was you basically, if you wanted access to a building, you had to figure it out and it was all personal effort and personal relationships, and individual problem solving. And over, let's say, the first decade in Nashville, we had a proliferation of charter schools. All the growth in charter schools were in this same very high poverty, low performing community that did have a lot of underutilized buildings. And then probably the last 10 years, most of the growth in charter schools have been in communities that are, you know, adding students and growing enrollment more rapidly. So I think a headline to that change is empty space, empty public school space used to be extremely helpful. It's less helpful now. And I think also, if you're opening a school now, a charter school now, especially in Nashville, you have to have a plan for a facility plan. It has to be a really good facility plan. There's a lot more scrutiny. There's a lot more, I think, regulatory scrutiny, both local and at the state. So I think times have changed. You have to have a great plan, and you have to be well resourced to do that.
Commissioner Patterson.
Yeah, mine is more of maybe a comment and a wondering that we should think about as a commission team. And it was really helpful and exciting to hear that you guys help and we're very flexible and we provide delays and we are certainly very accommodating. But it did make me wonder whether we should have a staff allocation, or is there some level of maybe dedicated facilities support, which could go in conjunction, Hayden, to, you know, adding something in the context of policy, so that we could almost do kind of the reverse of what I think the district facilities teams do, right? Where we actually are helping broker deals and arrangements. Again, not getting into the funding and maybe the bond pieces, but a more formal role so that we can help schools that we authorize get the facility support they need. Could be aspirational, but I know it probably takes staff time here and there the same way it takes the school staff time, but is there a role or an opportunity for us to maybe fill the gap in a certain way? Not necessarily a question for anyone, but something that's pulling on my mind as we think about this conversation.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, we're kind of at the end of the amount of time we ask these folks to spend with us. We are truly grateful for your time and insight. We consider you partners in our work, and we are looking forward to continuing to help you. You know, we need to keep this communication going and fully explore alternatives that might be out there for improvement in this area, given that the world has changed. With that, I'm going to go ahead and say thank you very much, and we'll cut you loose. Good luck.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I do want to say, as we're wrapping up and going, we worked tirelessly with the Rocket Ship Tennessee ED and tried to get him on. It was not our day, his day, not our day from a technology perspective, but we are planning to have a part 2 on facilities in October already. So we'll have an opportunity to bring him in Nashville when we're in Nashville to continue the conversation. And also we'll have some representatives from the New Tennessee Facility Fund who are going to come in October and present to you all on what that is. So this is a topic we're going to continue.
Thank you very much. All right. With that, we're going to move into the start of our next matter, which is the Business Operations Committee meeting. So I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Eddie Smith, who is chairing the meeting. Thank you very much.
And I just, for the record, I did see Ashley and Hayden updating their resumes as soon as I said that. I'm like, you know, oh Lord, he's talking again. All right, so the meeting of the business operating meeting to order. So starting off, welcome to the July 23rd, 2026 meeting of the Business Operations Committee of the Tennessee Public Charter School Commission. A link has been provided on the commission website for the public to view this meeting. At this time, Hayden, would you please take a roll call vote?
Mr. Carter, Mr. Lehrman, Mayor Smith.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have 2 members present. You have a quorum.
Thank you, Hayden. And for the record, I'd like to note that Chair Carter did notify the commission of his absence in advance and has been excused. Are there any other questions or comments from the commissioners before we begin? And this is now not a time for Terrence or anyone else to jump in like I do on their meetings to ask questions. Seeing no questions, the Business Operations Committee will hear several updates from staff on the agenda today. First, we will hear a presentation on enterprise risk management from Manager of Strategic Initiatives, Pam Lehman. The then Executive Director, Ted Stovall, will present the Executive Director's operational update. And finally, Director of Finance and Operations, Lawrence Walker, will present the budget updates, including the FY26 budget to actuals, an FY27 budget update, and projected FY28 budget, and a pre-approval for the grant management system. Do we have any questions or comments on the agenda before we vote to approve? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the agenda? Second. I just lost my place. All those in favor say aye. 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 All opposed say no. The ayes have it. It is approved. The agenda is approved. The meetings of the minutes of the meeting held on April 16th have been provided. Does anyone have any comments or edits to make regarding the prior minute before we proceed? Is there a motion to approve the minutes from the April 16th meeting? So I'll second. All those in favor say aye. 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 All those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the minutes are approved. First item on our agenda is a presentation on enterprise risk management from our Manager of Strategic Initiatives, Pam Lehman. Pam, you are recognized, and thank you for all that you do for the commission and trying to get all of this organized for us.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Commissioner Smith. Pam Lehman, Manager of Strategic Initiatives, and today I'm going to walk us through the enterprise risk management process. I'm going to talk about three main things. I'm going to discuss what the Financial Integrity Act is, what enterprise risk management is, and then I'll discuss the actual process of setting objectives, identifying risks and controls, and then the annual timeline of when we complete this process. So the Financial Integrity Act was initially intended or is intended to just assist state agencies on the overall effectiveness and accountability of state programs. And it was it was introduced as just a requirement to strengthen accountability. So it ties to enterprise risk management because that is what we as a state agency have to complete as a way to identify potential risks, how they might impact the agency, and then how we can control those risks. So basically, enterprise risk management is what is a problem, how might it impact us, and how can we effectively control or mitigate that risk. During this process, we meet with the Office of Internal Audit to complete the risk assessment, and it's ultimately sent to the Department of Finance and Administration. So the overall process is, in a nutshell, three different parts. First part, or part one, is setting objectives. And so each agency is tasked with setting objectives that align with their mission and goals. And so the commission's objectives align with our strategic plan, our four main priorities, which are high quality charter schools, strong operational effectiveness, community and stakeholder engagement, and agency oversight. So those are our four objectives, and they tie directly to the strategic plan. So part one, very easy for us to go ahead and get set up. But after we have those objectives set, then each agency must define key performance indicators and then list a level of variation or what they're willing to tolerate risk-wise. So if we look at our example on the right, our objective, or one of our objectives, is high quality charter schools. Underneath that objective, then, a key performance indicator would be we would like 100% of schools to meet or exceed standard on the Commission's school performance framework. And what we're willing to tolerate risk-wise is 20% on SPF ratings. Part two. If we move
20% on SPF ratings, that's 20% deviation from 100%.
That's correct.
Okay.
And so part three then is if we have 100% that we are trying to meet for the key performance indicator, and then a 20% level of variation, we find out that our risk is that less than 80% of schools, or if less than 80% of schools meet or exceed the school performance framework. That's the risk. That's what we do not want to happen. The second part of that is then how do we control it? So to control that risk or to prevent it from happening, we have four different things in process. We have a high bar for new start appeals and application review process. We have a strong pre-opening process. We annual review of school performance in the commission intervention policy. And we also have a thorough renewal process every 10 years. So three main parts. We've set our objectives. We have our key performance indicator and our level of variation with the risk. We find out what our risk is, what we don't want to happen, and then how we prevent it from happening with our controls. And so that's just one example within one of our objectives. And so we do that for each of our objectives and have quite a bit of a lot of different things that we look at for objectives, key performance indicators, risks, and how we're going to control it. So I think it sets out a really great map of what we're trying to prevent and what we know could potentially happen throughout the year.
How do we decide on the risk tolerance, the number there, and to what extent do we take inputs or learnings across time to evaluate that that number is set in the right spot?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we discuss it as a team. Tess and I meet, and once we do have the annual risk assessment completed, we do meet with the commission chair to go through, does everything look okay? Are there any questions, any clarification? So we definitely take feedback and have a good discussion about what we're willing to tolerate risk-wise. And Tess, if you have anything to add there.
Sure, I would just add that as we go into the next cycle, which Pam was going to talk about when this occurs, we use what we know from the previous year to then inform what, do we need to change any of the risk tolerances? Did we meet them? If we didn't, why didn't we meet them? And are there additional controls that we would want to put in place? So it is an annual process, and we're able to use like where we are from the last year.
Yeah, and I'm not saying this is the case. The one potential risk to the framework is that if we layer on more risks and the tolerances are too narrow, we end up, in some ways making it more difficult for us to do what we're supposed to do, which is be prepared to take risks. So I'm just highlighting that as sort of, something I think as we're going through this, we don't layer, more and more criteria with tight risk tolerances such that inadvertently does that make sense? Inadvertently not have enough risk taking in our efforts.
The other thing that's an important part of this as we go through to the end of it is looking back on the performance of our schools and saying, okay, we consider those things to be the controls, but are those the controls that are really useful in getting to the risk outcome that we're looking for? And right now on schools that are failing to meet our standards, that's one of the biggest questions is, are our intervention actions and our disciplinary actions really designed to be effective controls and reduce this risk?
And so the annual timeline for completing this assessment is each fall, coming up just in a few months here, we'll meet with the Office of Internal Audit, and they will discuss any changes or any updates that we need to be aware of. And then staff will have discussions and review our previous year's risk assessment and update any of the following. If an objective needs to be updated, key performance indicators, risk tolerance, like we mentioned, and any risks and controls. So coming up here in the next month or two, we're going to be having discussions about what needs to be updated, what, could change from last year to this year. So a lot of good discussion will be coming there. And once that is completed, then we review the assessment with the commission chair, and then final documents will be shared with the full commission once it's officially submitted. So that is the enterprise risk management process. There's a lot of steps that go into it, but that is the general process and overview. And I'm happy to take any questions.
And Pam, real quick, and as you'll remember this, I brought it up about 5 years ago because it was one of the things that I remember from my days having started in the legislature. Has the comptroller at any point tested any of our systems to see if there's anyone still with unauthorized access? Because we deal with so much student data down to even the school level, have all of those policies kind of been run through and looked at, and that we know that everybody's in compliance?
Yes, so on an annual basis, at a minimum, we do a new employee audit of both our systems and then school level access to confirm who still has access, who maybe has left. And then on an ongoing basis, as we know staff has left or there's a new staff member, we're making those changes. So we are doing that proactively within our system, both as a checkpoint in the beginning of the year and then ongoing.
Thank you. All right, anybody else have any questions for Pam on the strategic initiatives? Strategic risk.
My only point would be to the extent we do alter those, the risk tolerances. To the extent we do alter the risk tolerances, it'd be helpful just to have those flagged for us. I think that could be a really helpful learning process for the entire commission. So
We can definitely do that.
All right, seeing no other questions, Pam, thank you so very much. We will head next to Tess Stovall, who has our update for our executive director.
Thank you, Chair Smith. Just a few updates from the last quarterly meeting. We have hired and onboarded 2 additional staff members. One of those is a new position. It's a grants management position. That's something that we've been working towards for a really long time. Based on the sheer amount of grants funding and schools that we have, and as we grow, we really recognize the need to have a regional position who's over grants. We also replaced an authorizing project coordinator. our previous coordinator went off to University of Virginia for a PhD program. That concludes our kind of staffing or hiring for the short term, until we start hiring for a facility expert as Commissioner Patterson. But I linked an updated org chart that's available on our website. We have one quarterly meeting left of the year. I did want to flag for everyone that, number one, once we receive all of our appeals, we will schedule what we're going to hear on Thursday afternoon, what we're going to hear on Friday. We do intend to have virtual committee meetings leading up to that, so that once we actually get to the meeting itself, we can focus on maybe remaining business and then also appeals. So just look out that will be calendared. We'll be reaching out for scheduling. And then finally, we have presented to the committee the 2027 meeting date proposals. We polled everyone to get what meetings that we could make quorum and also meet our statutory deadlines. So those meeting dates are presented in the memo, January 21st and 22nd, April 15th and 16th, July 22nd, 23rd, and October 7th and 8th of 2027. And they are ready for committee approval and then moving on to the full commission. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Chair Smith.
Thank you very much. And I just want to add, for those of y'all that don't live in the grant world, the timing for this grant position could not have been better, considering the sheer hatefulness that the feds have all put on all of us in the grant world. Everything, because of the shutdowns and everything, has been delayed. So everything started dropping about early June, and they were giving us 21 to 24 days to write, complete, and submit all grant proposals for everything across the country. So perfect timing for you all not to be pulling your hair out and test, sending a daily I quit memo to Chris. So are there any other questions for Tess?
This is more of a point of clarification. The grants all refer to grants from the federal government. We talking about grants from nonprofit organizations, foundations, or just want to make sure I understand.
That's a great question. So these grants are all grants that we receive from the Tennessee Department of Education. Some of those are the entitlement grants, so the Title I's, Title II's, Title III's, IDEA, and some of those are state grants that our schools have chosen to apply for, and because we are the school district, we are then the facilitator of. So let's say like after school grants, extended learning grants, but all of that, because we're the school district, it funnels through us as the district, then we have to disperse it out. So we are responsible for managing the budget, managing the reimbursement process, managing the back and forth, and confirming that whether or not we are allowable expenses, and then ultimately getting reimbursed by the Department of Education. I'm giving a great preview for Lawrence's update on a grant management system that we are hoping to acquire, but that's the kind of summary of what we're doing.
And to clarify, thank you, Tom. The reason I say that is there's a natural cycle in the grant world, and usually a lot of those federal grants that are even coming through the state happen in April or May. State grants then start happening in June. All of that got compressed this year to all happening in June. So that's why it's been more chaos than normal. It's just because of the shutdown delay when the federal government can start issuing those to state. TEMA, for instance, normally would have theirs out in April. They just put it out and you had 13 days to get it into TEMA for all FEMA grants. So any other questions for Tess before we move on to the exciting budget presentation from? Yes, Chris.
The other thing that we do need to, and we'll go over with the grant system, we need to be cognizant of the amount of focus on any entity that's responsible for providing the oversight on the spending of grant money. We've seen so much of it being criticized at the federal level, but every single entity, including us, who dispenses a fair amount of grant money as a pass-through, we have got to be 100% perfect in the way we handle that. Because the scrutiny is coming.
Yes, it is. Seeing no other questions for Tess, do we have a motion to send the 2027 commission meeting dates to the full commission for approval? I'll make the second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the motion is approved. Seeing that, Tess, thank you for your update and everything. So we will head next, which is our final agenda, saving the best for last, on the budget presentation from our budget director of finance, Lawrence Walker, for our FY 26, our FY 27, and looking ahead to the FY 28 budget. No pressure there. 3 years at once, come on.
Thanks, Commissioner Smith. So I'll be walking through, as you say, key updates for FY 26, our FY 26 budget to actuals, our vendor services updates, which is the grant management system you got introduced to, and then also our FY 27 amended budget and FY 28 preliminary budget, both of those for review and vote. The materials have been provided prior for your review, but of course I will go through the overview for the committee. Starting with our FY 26 fiscal updates. So we've received our June 26 TISA and ADM adjustment as our 5th adjustment of the year. And just as a note, there will be one final true up generally around October, but that will be after districts have submitted their final approved final expenditure report. And we've encouraged our schools to plan for fluctuations in either direction. As of this adjustment, our per pupil amounts are $17,356 for Metro National Public Schools, which is pretty significant increase from what they were paying before. Memphis Shelby County, $12,773, and then Rutherford County, $10,863. For Shelby County and Rutherford County are pretty close to the last true up. But again, we ask our schools to plan for fluctuations in either direction, as we've seen clawbacks in the past, especially with MPS once they file their expenditure reports at the end of the year.
Lawrence, for Nashville, can you tell us why the jump? Because what was it last year, 14 or 15?
It was around 14 in the beginning of the year. It was a little bit more than 15, but that is local funds, local contribution. FY 26 budget to actuals. These have been updated to reflect our current spending and drawdown, reflective of our expenditures from beginning of the year, July 1, 2025 to June 15, 2026. And as you review, note the following. So one, we've closely tracked how this year's true up schedule has affected the authorizer fee collection. And you'll notice that the June authorizer fee collection projection for the year is about $200,000 more than what we saw in April. And we did see some ADM fluctuation from schools. So we saw some enrollment go up slightly, but this is pretty much a direct reflection of that higher per pupil amount being paid by MPS. There's another section that we brought to your attention previously, but there's an overage in the budgeted line item for supplies and materials. That's from our office build out that happened earlier this fiscal year. And that's just the way that finance and administration required us to classify that expense. But our total non-personnel costs still show a surplus. So we would just move those items around. Also, as of today, we still project the authorizer fee to cover 100% of our operating expenses. However, as always, we will provide final updates as the year closes and the expenditure reports are filed and any fluctuations are finalized. Now I'll go to our vendor services. So kind of as you all were just talking about, and as we discuss pretty often in the office, as we grow, we have to scale and we have to think about how we're being strategic in the ways that we increase our staff capacity. And so, as Ted said, we are seeking approval to procure a grants management system for the commission. And to provide even a little more context, in the past, we've used Microsoft Excel, we've used List and Power BI, lots of kind of internally created systems to manage grants. And I'll take this time just to give my team a shout out for just being masterful in how they have handled our grants administration and building those internal systems. But as we continue to grow, that is just it's unsustainable as we start getting more schools, as we have more grant funds to administer and more requirements as we have more grants. So again, we've begun evaluating some state contracted vendors and undergoing some demos, talking to companies. And we are seeking approval to continue that process, and we can provide exact dollar amounts once we receive those official quotes.
Could you share just some of the names of the vendors and products and just be helpful? I know we had a conversation, I think it was about our school 6 to 9 months. So it'd be interesting just to hear what set of available options you guys have already been taking a look at.
Sure. So we've casted a pretty wide net, and then we kind of came together on 3 main ones. So we were looking at Unisolutions, at a company called Idealix AI, and then another called Smart Simple.
And just to add on, I think the key here is that all of those are available on a current statewide contract. Many of those are currently used by other state agencies that have far greater grants than we administer. We had the pleasure of talking to Environment and Conservation, who we share a floor with, and they use one of these companies. So we're really seeking ones that are on a statewide contract that are used by current agencies, such that we can go ahead and just streamline our procurement process. And also knowing that what we need is far, far, far simpler than what other grant making agencies need, as Chair Smith might share.
Well, and my question there, and this goes to Chair Richard's question on the compliance side. Because I deal with a lot of different ones in state government, they do it vastly different ways. The ones that I have found are the best are the ones where we can upload all of our stuff into a secure portal versus sending it via email. Or the ones we're looking at user-friendly for the end consumer, which would be our schools, to be able to upload documentation and easier for our staff without having to go to a shared inbox, download and figure out how to save everything so you all can find it.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that we've been really diligent about in these demos, is making sure that we're able to do that, because my goodness, that is hard work and very tedious.
And limitation on email size. So sometimes I have to send like 3, 5, 7 emails to get all the supporting documentation to an agency. So that's why I'm also thinking through ease on the end user as well. So good to hear. All right. Any other questions on the grant management system? All right. You want to walk us through the FY27?
Sure. So the FY27 amended budget is also included for your review and approval. So you want to note that this budget is created with the updated revenue assumptions based on FY26 TISA and enrollment data, along with our most current enrollment projections for the new and expanding schools in 26-27. These are still conservative estimates, and they're calculated using our current per pupil rates. So as I noted earlier, the PPA rate still has the potential to fluctuate as districts turn in their FERC for FY26. And as such, we will update all of our projected revenues once we receive those final per pupil amounts. Another note is that staffing levels are expected to remain consistent, and any expenditure increases that you see are related to our growth in student population, and therefore our agency administration costs. But all factors considered, the amended FY27 budget projects a reversion and authorizes fee self-sufficiency. And then for our FY28 preliminary budget, we've also included that for your approval, but this draft includes updated revenue assumptions, still based on our FY26 TISA and enrollment data, but it includes the schools that are expanding in the year 27-28. There are no additional projections about growth beyond what we've already had approved. As with FY27, staffing levels are assumed to remain consistent with what we have currently approved, and also with our legislative budget authority. Our expenditures are expected to remain static, except for our contracted service amounts, and those will grow as we have more students and more employee travel costs. But as we move through this year's authorization cycle and we get a better sense of our future portfolio size, we'll work with the Department of Finance and Administration on any necessary requests this fall, and then we'll update the committee on any budget requests during the next meeting.
So Lawrence, and this is a question to Tez, as I look at this in FY28, so forget 27, we're already in that, but FY28, if I'm doing the math check of the projected reversion minus the state funding recurring, that leaves about $800,000. To Terrence's point, could we look at an additional position to help with that facilities thing? Those things that we've already talked about within this budget without needing more money from the legislature, since we're now getting to a fair point of no longer needing that money, we're self-sufficient, which was something that they tasked us with what, 6 years ago when we started?
Yes. The answer is yes. We actually have one remaining position that we haven't filled that we were granted to support our growth and with the additional responsibilities. So we would be able to, that budget assumes that we could fill that position. That's already been granted by legislative authority. We already have the budget for it. And also I think it's important to note that once we get, as Lawrence said, once we get through this authorization cycle, depending on the schools that get approved and our growth, we anticipate that the additional revenue to bump up as well.
Just a question on the projected reversion. Does that surplus amount just go back to the general budget, or what happens to the money? And I'm curious if there's ever been exploration of a rebate of some of our fees back to the charter operators themselves.
So we do rebate. So our state appropriation, anything we don't spend goes back to the general fund. We can't keep it. It just goes back. And we have used less and less of it over the last couple of fiscal years as we've moved towards self-sustainability. But in statute, any unused authorizer fee is sent back to our schools. We have regularly processed some level of a refund. I will note, as Lawrence said, if there's a clawback by a district because they've overpaid, that also impacts our authorizer fee. So we are cutting a check back to the local district. So we have to wait for all of the districts to complete their information, us to be given a final per pupil amount, and then we start processing those refunds.
And thank you for asking that this time instead of me, because every time I bring it up, they start crawling under the table because I don't want to get money back. Oh, yes, Commissioner Smith.
Thanks. This may be a Hayden question and slightly controversial, but I saw that Tennessee ranked last in funding per student, right? That April report, that we're 51st in the state with DC. I just didn't know at the state level. I've seen some statements out, but if there's talk, do we expect anything to increase in the coming years, or is that more, it would be more the local level?
I mean, I think a lot of the growth has been driven by local revenue collections, but on the eve of a new gubernatorial administration, so as you know, I think anything could happen. Just depends on the priorities in the next administration.
All right, any other questions of Lawrence for the FY 26, 27, or 28 budgets? Seeing none, I'm buying time while I get to that part of my script. Do we have a motion to approve the amended FY 27 budget? So second, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. The ayes have it. The FY 27 amended budget is approved. Is there a motion to approve the preliminary FY 28 budget? Yes, I will second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the FY 28 preliminary budget is approved. Is there a motion to approve the engagement of the procurement process for a grants management system?
So, yeah, so moved.
All right, I'll second. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. The ayes have it, and that motion is approved. Lawrence, I just want to say,
Just a clarification, the recommendation or the decision about which one to procure will come back to us.
Yeah.
Okay.
it's just to move forward in that process. So Lawrence, I just want to say thank you to you and your staff. Just looking at this where we were just a few years ago and now seeing that we are now fully sustainable, starting to not need that on the state money. We're now starting to move on our own. We're continuing to expand. You all have done a great job. So I just want to say thank you for everything that you and your team have done. Good luck on the grants portal. Praying for you guys. So with that, I want to just thank everybody for their attendance today. Terrence, I want to thank you for not jumping in. And I promise to do the same here in a moment.
Yes.
At this time, are there any final comments? Seeing none, just as a reminder, the next meeting of the Business Operation Committee will be prior to our October 8th, 2026 commission meeting. As Director Stovall said, those will be virtual, so just watch for the links on that, commissioners, and then that will be posted on our website for all the public. If there's no further comments, do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? So I will second. All those in favor say aye. If you say no, you get to stay here by yourself. We are adjourned.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and we'll take a few minute break till 10 minutes till 3, and then we'll resume with your meeting. Commissioner Patterson, thank you.
Well, as long as Commissioner Smith is excused.
I actually have a meeting out of that too, so that I can make that promise.
You know what system that you're accessing, like
Right.
the state level.
Right.
Oh,
Right.
But I'm.
See.
No,
They're tired now.
Don't use the one DHS.
Okay.
Which is an email.
Okay, well, okay.
I don't want to name the department, but. I don't have to send so much to the market. $5. Every time I put it in, I'm like, oh, just be good. Just be fine.
Second order, Commissioner Patterson. Floor. Oh,
Welcome everyone to the July 23rd, 2026 meeting of the School Performance and Accountability Committee of the Tennessee Public Charter School Commission. A link has been provided on the commission website for the public to view this meeting. Hayden, could you please take a roll call of the commissioners?
Commissioner Griscoe.
Here.
Commissioner Richard.
Here.
Chair Patterson.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have 3 members. President, we have
Okay, thank you, Hayden. The School Performance and Accountability Committee will hear several presentations from staff today. First, Deputy Director of Authorizing Maggie Lund will present an update on the Commission's school interventions. Authorizing Coordinator Sophie Benefield Gilmore will then provide an update on the pre-opening process. And finally, Maggie Lund and Director of School Programs and Supports, Maggie Stampley, will give us an update on the 25-26 school year and a preview of the 26-27 year. Do commissioners have any questions or comments on the agenda before we vote to approve? Is there a motion to approve?
so moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? No, the ayes have it and the agenda is approved. The minutes from the committee meeting held on May 26th, 2026 have been provided. Does anyone have any edits or comments to make regarding the prior minutes before we proceed? Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? No, the ayes have it and the minutes are approved. Our first item is a presentation on Commission School Intervention from Deputy Director of Authorizing Maggie Lund. Maggie, you are recognized.
Thank you, Commissioner Patterson. I am going to give you all an update as to the schools that are currently on intervention within our portfolio. I want to start off by saying, just part of quality authorizing, a really key responsibility is ensuring that we are closely monitoring our schools for accountability. And it is what Rebecca and I do on a daily basis, is analyzing, organizationally, financially, and academically how our schools are performing and what, if any, supports we need to be providing for our schools in terms of intervention. And so before we jump in today and talk about which schools are on intervention and what those processes look like, I did just want to say that, we do have a very robust intervention policy that's outlined. We have a lot of steps and details that go into this process, and wanted to just note that this is part of quality authorizing, is making sure that we are closely monitoring our schools. We're working with them to ensure that any deficiencies are remedied in a timely manner and are outlined as such. So we will go ahead and jump in. Great. So the slide that is in front of you right now is the schools that are under intervention at the commission. So there are 3 levels of intervention. There are a total of 5 levels of intervention on our intervention policy. We have schools that are under 3 different levels of intervention currently. We have a level 1, which is a notice of concern. This is essentially just a letter that is sent to the school saying, we are concerned about the specific thing that we are concerned about. And then a level 2 involves a plan of correction. And so that's when we work closely with the school through the plan of correction, provide feedback, get updates in every other month, and we'll continue to provide you all updates throughout that process. And level 3 is probationary status that has the same level of intervention in terms of a plan of correction. It holds more weight, and we tend to have more frequent meetings with the school and garner more updates from them. So that just gives you some context as to the kind of 3 tiers of intervention, if you will. So for level 1 intervention, we have Rocket Ship Nashville, Northeast Tennessee Nature Academy, and Empower Memphis Career and College Prep. Just as a brief reminder, we have talked about the notices of concern prior for Rocket Ship Nashville, Northeast, and Tennessee Nature Academy. Those level 1 interventions were issued for low TVOS and low letter grade scores as a result of actually 2 years previous data. That notice of concern was in effect until we get updated final data from this past school year. And then from there, we'll make the determination as to whether or not to remain on a level 1 intervention, to remove the intervention completely if they've made adequate progress,
or we can always escalate if something is, not going the way we would like to see it going. In a further slide, I'll talk about Empower Memphis Career and College Prep in more detail. For level 2, notices of deficiency, we have Nashville Collegiate Prep. We discussed this at our previous meeting as a result of their interim. We did place them on a level 2 notice of deficiency, and we're in a process of developing a plan of correction with them. And Bluff City High School, which has been on a level 2 notice of deficiency. So I'll talk about those in more detail. And then level 3, probationary status, we have Wooddale Middle School and Lester Prep, both of which were designated as priority schools. And so they are on a level 3 intervention, which again, I'll talk more in this presentation about. So as I mentioned, a level 1 intervention is the lowest level of intervention that we will place schools on. Really what we're just looking to see is improvement towards the objectives the improvement towards the deficiencies that are outlined within the letter that we issued. So we, as I mentioned, are waiting on full sets of academic data to determine what next steps we should make for schools that are on a level 1 intervention, primarily Rocket Ship, Nashville, Northeast, and Tennessee Nature Academy. Those, as I mentioned, were from low accountability scores and low TVOS scores from Tennessee Nature Academy's first year of operation and Rocket Ship Nashville Northeast first year within our portfolio. So I'll continue to keep you updated once we have updated academic data to let you know where we fall with that. And as I mentioned, there are kind of 3 next steps, right? If the school stays relatively the same, we can continue a level 1 notice of concern with them. If the school needs to move up to a level 2 intervention, if the data gets worse or does not improve, we can do that and implement a plan of correction, which is a more kind of intensive intervention. But if improvements are made and we feel good that they've addressed the deficiencies, we can always remove the intervention altogether. So more updates to come on that once we have a fuller set of academic data. Now I'd like to talk about Empower Memphis Career and College Prep. So we have issued a notice of concern for them recently for the following organizational items. So at this point in the year, we are doing what we call end of year closeout meetings with all of our schools. And we're able to run majority of the indicators on the organizational section of our framework at this point in time because we have that data. So we're able to provide schools with whether or not they would be meeting or not meeting majority of the standards within the organizational section of our framework. And so we meet with all the schools and review that with them in July. Upon completing this for Empower Memphis Career and College Prep, there were a significant number of indicators that are organizational in nature in which they are not meeting. They're up here on the screen for you. They did not meet teacher licensure and staff credentialing requirements. They did not meet financial reporting and compliance requirements, which is including grant drawdown rates. That's important because those grant drawdown rates, if not compliant with that, can affect other schools' abilities to access those funds. They did not meet requirements of service for English language learners. They did not meet requirements for protecting the rights of students with disabilities. Those were mainly compliance items. They had historically low enrollment, which also meant that they did not meet the material terms of their education program as outlined within their charter agreement. Ultimately, what this means is because they had such low enrollment, it affected things like staffing, instruction. And so that is why organizationally they did not meet the material terms piece. What we have put in the letter that was sent as of yesterday to the board chair and school leader is that we are going to check in Q1. So we want to see that the issues, compliance issues, and also enrollment have resolved after the October enrollment poll. So at that point in time, we'll check in to see, are they largely compliant on service of students with disabilities and English learners? Are they meeting the financial reporting compliance requirements? And do they have licensed and credentialed staff teaching students? And are they doing the proper things to ensure that those staff are in the process of getting licensed and credentialed? Because we know that that does take some time. We'll also pull their enrollment at that time to ensure that they are meeting the budgeted projections that they have stated at that time. And then after that Q1 meeting, we'll determine whether or not they have remedied the issues. And so from there, similar to what I shared on the last slide, we have options. So we can either continue the notice of concern, we can elevate the concern to a notice of deficiency and create a plan of correction, or we can eliminate it if they're meeting the standards.
There's a question, Clint.
Yeah, I just want the whole commission to understand, there has been a huge amount of work between the staff, Maggie, Cass, and everyone with the Empower Memphis Career and College Prep Organization as we've gone through the spring. One reason why we went ahead and did this notice of concern when we did was we did not want the first third of the school year to go by before these particular matters were addressed, with the goal being that all of the things here that they can fix, and they are mostly things they can fix, will be in good shape when we do the review in October, rather than waiting till October and then you're into the holiday time period before you're doing the review. So this is one of the outputs of us trying to be sure that our work that we're doing in intervention is effective, and making sure we're moving things forward to try to provide clear guidelines on what they need to do to meet the objectives. So I really appreciate the staff's work on this and their thoughtful approach.
Thank you, Chair.
I'll add to, we had a really great conversation with Muna yesterday where she shared some updates, and she understood the items outlined within the notice of concern and is proactively creating her own. She has her own plan of correction that she is sharing with us, which was not required as a result of this letter, but definitely demonstrates her want to come into compliance with these items. Moving forward, so going to talk now and shift a little bit to level 2 intervention. Level 2 intervention, as I mentioned, is a notice of deficiency, which involves the creation and execution of a plan of correction. Nashville Collegiate Prep earned this intervention after completing their interim review, which is at the 5-year mark halfway through their charter term. This is a comprehensive review that we do that involves their submission of an interim report. We visit the school for a full day and interview stakeholders and observe classes. And from there, we outline some areas of improvement. And so from those areas of improvement, we've met with the school to determine some areas of deficiency in which they are creating a plan of correction to remedy. And we are beginning bi-monthly meetings with the school for updates on their progress within the plan of correction in September. The plan of correction addresses the items that are up here on the screen, things like cumulative academic performance. So that's obviously improvements in accountability data, TBOS, et cetera. We're also looking at improvement in subgroup performance, primarily with Black and African American students, because that is where they receive their TSI designation from the state. But also we're looking at subgroup performance with students with disability, English learners, et cetera. Academic program delivery and service to special populations. There were some compliance issues with service to special populations that is part of their plan of correction to remedy. We're also looking at consistent program delivery across the school. They are going to be fully built out K-12 very soon. And so given that that's a large grade span, we want to see that that mission and model are seen across classrooms, all grade levels. Chronic absenteeism, student retention and enrollment, teacher retention, and then financial outlook and projections. So they're currently working on their final draft of this plan that they will be submitting to us likely this week. And then from there, we ask for bi-monthly updates, which is every other month we meet with them. They provide us updates in relation to these items. And then at the end of the year, when we have academic data, we're able to make a determination as to whether or not they would continue at this level, or we can move levels if needed. The other school that is on a level 2 intervention is Bluff City High School. They have been on a level 2 intervention for a while. As you may remember, in previous years, after their interim, they landed on a level 3 probationary status intervention. And so this actually was decreased a few years ago to a level 2 intervention to honor some of the work that they did through intervention to improve their performance. And so we've been meeting with the school bi-monthly for updates on these indicators throughout their level 2 intervention. I do want to note that they are currently under the renewal process. So we are waiting on full academic data to determine any further steps on this intervention. But I did want to share with you some key timeline pieces with the renewal, because I think it coincides with some of this intervention. So at this point in time where we are in the renewal process is they've submitted their renewal application and the review committee has reviewed it. We're working on a recommendation right now. We did conduct a capacity interview with the network leadership team. We are going to be conducting their renewal site visit, which is a full day, pretty heavy review in the fall. That'll happen in September. We hold a public hearing in November, and then the decision for renewal will come in January at the January meeting. One note about this is, and I just want to share this, the accountability timeline for data release, which we'll share in a further presentation, is demonstrating that full data sets and letter grade will not be publicly available until January. So we'll be working on a pretty tight timeline to get you all the data that is needed to make that determination in that renewal process, but we do anticipate having it prior to that decision.
Thank you. Can I quick question? So going back, I think you said this correctly, but I'll make sure. The data that was for the testing that just took place for the 25-26 school year may not be ready until January of 27.
Correct. We have a slide in a future presentation that I will be sharing further details on that. You will have the information you need to make your decision. It will likely be under embargo. But it will be a tight timeline.
Let me go back to NCP for a second.
Sure.
So your discussions today, do they understand the need to work with us, get some things more consistent, all the things that we have talked about, remembering some of the back and forth when this statute was set up, the financial concerns that were raised because of the actions we were taking. So I'm interested, if you all had these conversations, do they fully appreciate the fact that we're not in here trying to do anything other than to get a school that's productive? You just need to work with us. Is that your take as you sort of laid this plan out? And, you know, we must have to see how it's executed, but was that what you saw as you were sitting down and walking through with them what you presented?
Yes. So I think a couple things to answer your question that I think are points that may help clarify some of this. I think one of the things is when we place a school on intervention, we outline the areas of deficiency for them that we want to see improved. But ultimately, it is the school's plan. The school owns the plan. They're the ones in the building. It's their model. They are responsible for executing the plan and providing us updates to ensure that they are improving. I would say the conversations that we have had with NCP leadership from my purview have been very positive. They are very open to the feedback that we've provided for them. We're still working with them on the final details of the plan and waiting for a final plan to come back with some more specifics on some of these items. But they were very open to our feedback and we had a really productive conversation.
Would it be fair to say that our objective with the interim renewal process, which is to go through this in 5 years, so there are no surprises when they get to the end of their time period, were met in that they understand where their deficiencies are and where they may be challenged on renewal if they don't succeed in their plans?
Correct. And I would commend the commission's passing of the renewal criteria to even further that point. It's really clear in helping our schools understand exactly where they stand in terms of renewal based on our framework. And so I would agree with that statement.
Perfect lead in for my next question. On Bluff City, several of they were one of the 4 schools that we got from the DOE when we were formed. So they've been in our portfolio for a long time. And they have struggled throughout that tenure. Are they aware that they are challenged with respect to our renewal performance criteria in those years? It's not just this year and their performance this year, in the prior years, that they are aware of that?
Yes, the renewal criteria outlines 2 important pieces when looking at cumulative performance data. We look at the entire tenure of the school. So at this point, it's up to through year 8 that we have data for. And we determine whether or not the school is on or off track for renewal, meeting standard the majority of that tenure. And we also have a component within the renewal criteria that looks at the 3 years leading up to renewal, right? And so 1, we want to see overall performance, and 1, we want to see a positive trajectory. Bluff City is currently off track for renewal on the 8 years of data that we have based on academic performance and organizational performance. They are aware of that and they addressed it within their application they submitted to us. Again, it will be interesting to see in a lot of this decision for you all, the data from this past school year, as Commissioner Patterson was mentioning the release, as this is why I'm bringing this up. Once we have that data, that will complete year 9. So that will complete the 3 years leading to renewal for you all in terms of that portion of the renewal criteria decision. And I think that will be imperative information for you all to consider.
Maggie, can you remind me, so a lot of these schools with an intervention plan are part of a larger network. Are you guys having meetings at the CMO level, at the school level? Is it a combo? Do we have like a requirement for who's involved? What does that look like?
That's a good question. Typically, well, I can speak for Bluff City High School. We actually meet with both. So we have members of Iota Community Schools as part of the network in those calls, and we also have the school principal in those calls. So typically when we hold intervention meetings, and it's the same with NCP, we ask that the principal is in those calls as well as the network leadership. But we find it productive with both there. Okay, any other questions? So for Bluff City High School, just as a reminder, the focuses that we have within their plan are cumulative academic performance, subgroup performance, chronic absenteeism, student retention and enrollment, and teacher retention. One thing I want to share that is a positive that I think is worth noting here as we're talking about intervention is in our previous meeting that we had with Bluff City High School, they shared the appreciation that they had for the intervention. They shared that it was helpful for them to learn on, when everything is happening all the time and you're a school leader, it's helpful for you to focus in on specific areas that your authorizer finds important, and they shared that. And one very positive thing that they shared was they're trending to have cut their chronic absenteeism rate in half for this past year's school data. So it's demonstrating improvement through intervention. But as I mentioned, a lot of the decision hinges on the performance of this previous school year. And so a lot of that is yet to be seen at this point. Moving on. So level 3. Level 3 also involves a plan of correction, but this is also probationary status. So the school, Wooddale Middle School, this is also a school that is within the Iota Community Schools network, has been placed on the highest level of intervention with the Department of Education due to a priority school designation. So the department identifies priority schools, and then they actually have their own tiered system in which they determine, which level of intervention they would receive. So we are working with Wooddale Middle School on their intervention, but the school, due to the tier placed by the Department of Education, is required to work with an external turnaround specialist. So we have selected Instruction Partners to be the external turnaround specialist. And the school is working directly with Instruction Partners to develop their plan of correction. So this is a little bit different than how we run internal plan of corrections with ourselves, because we're working with an external consultant here. But the consultant is working directly with the school on the needs assessment. And so once school is back in session, they've already begun meeting. They will be in the building with them, conducting the needs assessment and developing the plan of correction that we will then use as the basis for our plan of correction. So it will be aligned across the board. We will have bi-monthly updates with the school on progress within their plan of correction. And the focus of this plan is overall achievement and growth. As I mentioned, we're waiting on the needs assessment to get more details and more granular as to what that will look like and specific strategies they're using, et cetera. But we're waiting for that external consultants to develop that in conjunction with the school. So we'll have that by mid-September.
Maggie, where is Wooddale Middle School on the, I guess, authorization timeline? Like, when would they be up for renewal?
They are early, so I think they're in year one. Yeah, this is year 2. So they have a while before interim even. Next is Lester Prep.
Thanks, Tara, but just to remind everyone, They would find themselves under the state law if they are designated a priority school twice, in successive, yeah, so just keep that in mind.
The other school that is on a level 3 intervention is Lester Prep. They are a lesser tier assigned by the Tennessee Department of Education, which means that we actually, as their authorizer and LEA, lead the intervention process for them. So they're not required to work with an external consultant. They submitted a needs assessment to us, and then together with them, we developed a plan of correction. Their needs assessment was very thorough, and we used it as the basis of the plan of correction. We've met with them to discuss metrics that we will discuss at our bi-monthly meetings, and we are working to set those up starting in September. The outlined areas of focus for their plan are improving proficiency and growth in ELA and math, improvements in TVOS, and improvements in NWEA MAP performance, which is their internal growth measure. Within these specific areas, they have broken down very specific strategies that they're using, from, hiring additional coaches to they've replaced the principal to further professional development. All of those things are things that they're reporting to us in these bi-monthly meetings for us to check in. But the measures that we have outlined here are aligned with the requirements of the Tier 1 priority school designation with the TDOE. So we have aligned our plans as much as possible to kind of limit administrative burden where we can with these schools. And that's all I have on intervention. Any questions?
Question. Thank you, I really appreciate it. And it also demonstrates that, as our questions have alluded to, I mean, we are walking with schools through every step of the process. One, to ensure that we're supporting students the best way possible, but also so that there are no surprises, staff and schools and families, but also for us as a commission. So we're really grateful for the thoroughness and detail. The next item on our agenda is an update on the pre-opening process from.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Just one quick, maybe this is a conversation for later, or maybe there's a quick. So about 25% of the schools on some level of intervention.
Roughly.
What's your take, how do you feel about that? I know it's.
I think, I mean, as our portfolio expands, we have got, when I started here, we had 4, and we're now at 24. 27, correct. I think as our portfolio expands, we continue to get schools that are very different in nature. We have schools that serve very different populations of students from each other, schools that have very different models from each other. And we as authorizers are really tasked to keep a high bar, which we do with our school performance framework, also be understanding and innovative with these things. And so I think the list of intervention to this point, I don't think is something that is unexpected for a portfolio this size. However, I would say, it's an opportunity for us to lean in further and make sure that the schools are progressing the way we want them to. And I think, as I mentioned in the beginning of this presentation, this is a key responsibility of authorizers, is to ensure that we are leaning in when we need to. So I think this demonstrates how closely we work with our schools to ensure that they're performing and meeting the standards that we outline.
To add on, I completely agree with Maggie. We talk about a lot, like there are 3 key responsibilities we have. Approval of new schools, corrective action, renewal/revocation decisions, right? So we are talking about right now, okay, what can we learn based on what we've seen in the last year or intervention when we're looking at new start applications, right? Where are we seeing the pitfalls? What does that look like? When we're thinking about future interventions, what does that look like? How do we get in early? And I think one of the things we consistently hear from our schools is they appreciate transparency. They know exactly where they are with the commission, and that is actually a gift because they know we're not going to surprise them. Oh my gosh, surprise, you're getting a revocation notice, right? And so for me, it's like that early action is actually critically important to this relationship and this process.
So, Tom, following your question, so if we look at other school systems that have charter schools, Metro Nashville, Memphis, Shelby County, Hamilton County, do they does their data also sort of mirror what we're looking at in terms of the schools that we've got? There are 4 of them. Do you all have any sense of that? Like in Metro Nashville, what is the percentage of schools that they have on some type of program like this where they're having to work with them?
I don't know off the top of my head other districts that have schools on intervention. I know intervention policies differ from district to district. So I think it may not be a total apples to apples comparison, but I think to your point, that's one of the reasons we have built in with such high percentage of the academic framework, the comparative performance is ensuring that schools are being compared to the resident district with their scores so that we're not grossly off from what other schools within that resident district are performing. But I don't have the numbers off the top of my
Do
head.
you think we could find, let me tell you what I'm asking. To my earlier question, when we've got a new administration coming in, a new commissioner of education, they're looking at this kind of data, without any context. I just would hope that we're able to say, when you look at how our school's performing and how the commission is working, that we are either comparable or better, whatever, but something so that we're able to share that information rather than somebody else trying to sort of put it in. So that's part of the reason for the question. And I'm glad you brought it up because I just think we've got to be able to tell our story and share how we're doing as we're looking for continued support and I hope additional growth opportunities with whoever is in the next administration.
Sure, and I think we certainly hear from other authorizers in conversations about notices of concern, et cetera, that they are placing, but we will follow specifically to find out. I think as Maggie said, we see a variety of different approaches for authorizers. And so I think what Chair Richards and I have talked about is we don't want to be ticky-tacky, right? I mean, we're all organizations with room to improve, but also we want to be on the front end and not catching people on the back end. So, but we will do some very specific outreach to the authorizers and see if we can gather some more information.
And I think the other thing we're looking at, because the state priority list is public. And that's, of course, not limited to charters. There are any number of non-charters. We need not only to know what are the numbers like for Memphis, Davidson County, where they have charters that are not our charters, but we also need to know what are their numbers for their non-charter school population. Because one of the things we struggle with our Memphis schools, and we face this with both Bluff and with Wooddale, is they come from a decades old history of underperformance before they were taken away from the local district. So to us, I mean, it's one of those things, how are you doing against the schools in your district otherwise? So we're going to look at all of that.
Thank you guys for those questions. The next item on our agenda is an update on the pre-opening process from authorizing coordinator Sophie Benefeld-Gilmore. Sophie, you're right.
Thank you. I am Sophie Benenfeld-Gilmore. I am the authorizing coordinator, and I oversee the pre-opening process for schools new to the commission. Today, I'll be giving an update on schools approved to open in the 2026-27 school year. Here is a brief overview of the pre-opening process. The process begins in November for all schools approved to open the next school year. We have monthly one-on-one check-ins with school leaders to discuss deliverables and any other pertinent information. Commission staff also hosts monthly trainings during the pre-opening year to prepare schools on best practices as part of the LEA. School walkthroughs and subsequent pre-opening closeout meetings are completed in late July before school begins. For schools opening this coming school year, that will happen next week. There are 4 schools approved to open in the fall 2026. Jackson Museum School in Jackson, Madison County, Knowledge Academy at the Crossings in Metro Nashville Public Schools, the Rock Academy for Metro Nashville Public Schools, and Rocketship Tennessee 4 in Rutherford County School. You'll see that the Rock Academy and Rocketship Tennessee 4 have exercised their right to delay and will be opening in 2027. So this year, Jackson Museum School will be opening for the first time in fall of 2026, and Knowledge Academy at the Crossings will be opening with the commission. So they're transferring districts from Metro Nashville Public Schools to us with the commission. All schools follow a pre-opening checklist as they open with us, and embedded within that checklist is the ready to open criteria, which are the most important items for a successful charter opening. These items are discussed in our monthly check-ins with our pre-opening schools. So the items are the startup plan, which is fully updated by December after they've been approved. The facility, which includes a construction scope and timeline and a lease or purchase agreement. Staffing, which is monthly projections updated to match student enrollment. We are also looking for key positions such as operations and finance individuals. Enrollment, they should have projections submitted monthly and they have different targets to hit, but they should be fully enrolled by July 15th. And finally, is that financial plan with a fully approved board budget in July. Yes.
So in the staffing part, I'm assuming that part of it, when you talk about adequate teachers, is also make sure they understand licensure, things like this, so that they clearly have that as part of what they're looking at. That's right.
Yes, it is. Thank you. Yeah.
Do we encourage schools to over enroll? Know that there's always retention in the first month or so, or is that not something we encourage?
We encourage schools to enroll as many students as they can enroll. So I'm going to go over each of the criteria, and I'll give you a little update on those schools as well. Enrollment trends. You read my mind. So Jackson Museum School has demonstrated really strong interest as a new option. They're the first charter school in Jackson, Madison. The school is currently over 100% enrolled. Last time I spoke with Dr. Little, they were at about 106% enrolled. I want to note that this is very unusual for pre-opening schools. Last year we had 7 pre-opening schools and they hovered at around 80% enrolled at this time of year and when school started. So this is unusual. Knowledge Academy at the Crossings is at 85% of its budgeted enrollment at this time. But again, all schools are continuing to enroll students. So that was as of July 15th, but they enroll more and more every day. Next is staffing trends. So as Jackson Museum School had strong interest in students, they also had strong interest from teachers in the area looking to try out a new model. They're fully hired. There's also very stable staffing for Knowledge Academy at the Crossings. They noted that earlier this year, they're still stable. Finally, it's facilities. This continues to be one of the most difficult parts of the pre-opening process and in general, as Beth noted earlier, and our operators. For Jackson Museum School, they're located in a county new to charter schools. They will be opening in a temporary facility while securing their permanent facility, which they have purchased, now needs to be fully renovated. So a lease has been signed for that temporary space. They will be open on time on August 3rd, and we will be doing that walkthrough next week. KA will be in its same building. To look at our delaying schools, facilities proved to be a large hurdle. Rocketship Tennessee 4, which will be opening in Rutherford, chose to delay due to delays in the purchasing and therefore renovating of their new facility to make sure that they have a strong opening. The Rock Academy has chosen to delay due to the enrollment challenges they've faced, resulting from being the first opportunity charter school and its narrow enrollment criteria for at-risk students. That's the end.
Makes sense. It's that The question? Yeah, sure, go ahead. The museum school, is there a model, or I should say, is there an example of a good museum school that we're looking at to sort of evaluate them against? I'm just trying to get a better sense for the set of comparables that we've, yes.
Yeah, so Dr. Little was a BES fellow, and she went and visited museum schools all around the country. So she has strong models to look at, and Maggie also developed the school performance framework with mission specific goals specifically aligning to their museum model.
And maybe we can take this offline, but just I'm just wondering, are there one or two standout examples of museum schools? Like if I wanted to just get up to speed and understand this model better, what are the one or two schools you recommend we take a look at outside of the state example?
I will ask Dr. Little.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And before we move to the next item, I just want to know, it's always exciting when we move into a new county and provide opportunities for students and families. So I am super excited to visit the museum school and get to Jackson. Really, really excited. So thank you for your support of that particular school. Final item on our agenda are updates from the 25-26 school year and a preview of the 26-27 school year from Maggie Lund and Director of School Programs and Supports, Maggie Stampley. Waiting to say this. Maggie's.
You weren't going to say it, I was. Like, welcome, the Maggies are ready to present. Great. We're going to run through some school year 25-26 updates. As a reminder, that's the school year that we just closed out, and preview some updates for school year 26-27, which is starting here very shortly. So school year 25-26 updates. As I alluded to in an earlier presentation, here you can see on your slides is the accountability data release timeline for the school year that just completed. So some things to note here. You will see that the full TCAP dashboard is not public until the end of August. This will showcase test scores from this past year's TCAP. There was a partial release on July 13th that excluded science, and science is coming on August 25th. So that's when we will have the TCAP dashboard with the assessment files. For TVOS, which is our state value add growth measure, we will have a partial release starting in August with the full release on October 5th and November 6th. The public release, where it will no longer be embargoed and we can discuss it in public meetings, would be November 20th. For accountability data, which is the data, there is slight differences between accountability data and assessment data. The accountability data, without getting into too many details, is what we use within our school performance framework. It is more reliable data. That means it's gone through like the appeal process and things. This data is going to be available August 24th, November 5th, and October 5th and November 16th for designations. That's an internal release. Public release will not take place until December 18th. That's when we'll have designations. And then the full public release with the state report card of all data will not be until January 28th. So this is what I was meaning when I'm saying, we're going to be waiting on final data, likely to be completing school performance frameworks in December. We will have that information ahead of some critical decisions that are coming in January for you all, and are able to share it, but we may not be able to discuss it publicly on the record, depending on what it is. But we'll keep you posted.
And that was maybe where my question was going. Does it make sense to push back our meeting in a week or two, or?
So we have a statutory deadline for renewals of February 1st.
Got it. Makes sense. You give it that. And then also for clarification, and maybe this is for the listening public or viewing public, the data that was released July 13th, is that embargoed or is that now available to the public? So
what is available to the public right now is district and state level assessment files. So on the TCAP dashboard, if you were to go to it now, you could see district level assessment information and then state level. When we get to the end of August, that's when school level assessment data will be available. But then when you're talking about public availability of TBOS, that's November 20th. Public availability of the report card, which will include letter grades, is January 28th.
Thank you for that clarification. Back to the Maggies.
Right. The next thing I want to update you on is governing board engagement. So we have, over the course of school year 25-26, successfully attended a governing board meeting for all schools within our portfolio. We're committed to continuing this engagement for next year. We found it an incredible engagement measure. And we're working with schools to get those scheduled for the next school year. We will share all upcoming board meetings at future commission meetings, and you all are encouraged to attend as we are. Now looking ahead to school year 26-27. I'm going to take some time to go over our portfolio of schools and just take a look by region, what like the number of schools we have and their enrollments. So starting with Memphis Shelby County, we have the schools listed here. You can see the operators as well as their grade structures. If there is a grade structure there in parentheses, that means that the school is expanding, and that's what they are expanding to. So you can see what grades are being served for each year or for this upcoming school year for each school. The new additions here are Empower, Memphis, Career and College Prep. Geographic district, Metro Nashville Public Schools. This is 2 slides. We had to break them up because we have so many. You'll see here that we have the KIPP schools, Nashville Collegiate Prep, and the Rocket Ship schools. Nashville Collegiate Prep, just as a note, is almost fully expanded. So this upcoming school year, they're serving K-11, and then the following school year, they will be fully built out at K-12. This continues MNPS, so we have the lead schools here, and then we have our single site operators, Tennessee Nature Academy, Invictus Nashville Charter School, Nurses Middle College Prep, and Compass Community School, and our newest addition, Knowledge Academy at the Crossings. These are our schools in geographic districts that are not Memphis Shelby County or Metro Nashville Public Schools. So we have Rutherford Collegiate Prep, which is K-8 in Rutherford County, and our new addition, Jackson Museum School, which is opening this school year, K-2 in Jackson, Tennessee. So the commission's portfolio of schools is broken down here. You can see that we have 15 schools in Davidson, 9 schools in Shelby County, 1 in Rutherford, 1 in Jackson, Madison. And so that brings us to a total of 26 operating schools for the 26-27 school year. Any questions on that before I move into some site visit updates? Great. Site visits. So looking ahead to school year 26-27, we have mapped out all of our site visits. As a reminder, site visits are an important part of our oversight and monitoring process. We firmly believe that we should visit all schools within our portfolio at least once a year. We garner really valuable data from these visits, things that we see outside of just accountability data. We really get to see the school's culture, how it feels in the school, if students are joyful in their learning. We get a lot of qualitative elements that are really helpful in us understanding the school's model and mission. With that, we have 26 to visit in this upcoming school year. So we have kind of mapped out what that looks like. We're going to take visits in both the fall and the spring for schools. And we have about 3 commission staff members go to each visit. Some updates to site visits. We have new automatic renewal options that was passed in statute for schools designated as high performing. So what we've done is we've taken iterations of that high performing language, and we've updated the site visit protocol to have what's called condensed visits for schools that qualify as high performing. So this is really similar to what Maggie will likely talk about with the risk assessment, where we're just looking at schools that are doing really well and giving them condensed visits where we're not going to be in their building as long, just to ease some administrative burden for those schools. So that means that we have 3 categories of site visits going forward. Schools still have the opportunity for a full day site visit if they're in a critical year, such as interim or renewal. those visits are always a full day because those are more significant reviews. We have schools that have significantly large grade band structures like K-12. It's simply impossible for us to get a good sense across a K-12 building in a short visit. And so typically those schools will have to have full day visits just so we can see a representative subset of grade levels and subjects taught. And also schools that receive higher levels of intervention will likely receive a half or a full day visit if we feel that our concerns cannot be addressed in shorter of a visit, like a half day. Half day visits are kind of our go-to visit for schools that are in their first 2 years of operations, schools that are not within high stakes review years or do not have any specific concerns. Schools that are on like level 1 intervention and some level 2 intervention can still receive a half day depending on their grade structures and how severe the intervention is and what we need to see at that visit, but they can also receive a half day, not just a full day. And then this is new. This is the condensed visit. So the criteria is listed here for schools that can earn a condensed visit, which it will be about 2 to 2.5 hours. Schools that are considered high performing in alignment with our criteria outlined in statute and within our new updated renewal policy, which Ashley will be going through, policy 3.600. Schools that meet all major categories on the school performance framework and are not on any sort of intervention. Schools that we don't have any significant concerns around service of special populations, and schools that are not within high stakes review years, such as interim and renewal. And I will turn it over to the other Maggie.
Good afternoon, Maggie Stampley, Director of School Programs and Support. The School Programs and Support team annually conducts a federal programs risk assessment. I'm going to share some of the data that we gathered and the actions that we're taking out of that today. The risk assessment is comprised of an extensive rubric that we use to assess risk and in turn tailor our support and oversight throughout the year. The intent of our risk assessment is to remove administrative burden and allow us to really focus in on the schools that need the most support. Okay, on this slide, you're going to see the data changes from last year to this year. So tier 1 on the risk assessment indicates less of a risk, therefore we're providing less support. Tier 3 indicates a higher risk, therefore we are going to have more support and more oversight throughout the year. I'm going to go over some high-level trends from this data. So the data from our English language learners department, we had more schools move into tier 1, which indicated stronger outcomes for our English language learners. For special education, more schools shifted into tier 2, showing movement away from the lowest performing category. Fewer schools were identified in tier 3, suggesting reduced need for intervention support. All of this is positive. So the key takeaway here is overall, the portfolio showed positive movement with growth in higher performing tiers and fewer schools requiring the highest level support, which is all what we want to see, and we're happy to see this. On this slide, you're seeing the same data, but I broke it down by schools. So each of these rows indicates a different school. It shows you the distribution of risk levels across schools, specifically when it comes to our special populations groups with English language learners and special education.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Can you go back to the picture?
Sure.
I just have one quick question. Maybe I'm making sure I'm reading this right. 24-25 EL was 16.67 in tier 1. 25-26 went up to 61.5%.
I'm glad you pointed that out. So one thing to note, and if you look at this with our English language learners, we have some schools that have an incredibly high population. We have some schools that have no students that qualify. So the data when it comes to our English language learners, it's going to be slightly skewed because if you have one student, you are likely going to be very low risk and you'll be tier 1. So when you look at this indicates risk level, not necessarily performance level.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure if that answer your question.
It just seemed like a huge jump. So it's
Let me go back to make sure that I'm looking at what you're saying.
So more schools moved into tier 1, indicating stronger outcomes for English learners.
Yeah.
Well, that's a true statement.
Yes.
Except it was just a huge movement.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
yes.
That's real.
Yeah. Yes, that is good. However, again, going back to that point, there is we get some tier ones by default based on the population size. But that is good. But yes, we are seeing positive growth.
This percent of schools, not percent of students.
This is correct. Percent of schools. So there are some real wins from this. However, I'm about to show you some of the challenges just to give you an idea of what challenges our schools are facing and also the support that we're providing and the way that we're addressing this. Okay, on this slide right here, you can see a highlight of the 4 lowest scoring areas under English language learner. Now there is an extensive rubric, and this is only the 4 lowest areas. These are very similar to what we saw in our special education. I wanted to pull out a couple of these indicators. I also left the description on there and the max points, just so you have an idea of using how we evaluate this and also the weight. So what we're seeing, we weight it based on areas that might have the biggest impact on student learning. So the first row, you see it says L coordinator experience. Both with English language and special education, we are continuing to see high turnover and also hiring of inexperienced staff. We're also just seeing a low applicant pool in these specialized areas. On row 2 and row 4, these numbers indicate compliance overall, essentially. So are we seeing them turning in documents on time with timelines? Are we having them correcting their findings? We hold our schools to a very high bar when we monitor. We do monitoring quarterly. It is reflective of the bar that the department is holding us to. And so while it is a high bar, we do think it is an appropriate bar, but compliance has become a challenge for some of our schools. The third row, what you see is our student comparative population. Similar to what I was saying earlier, some of our schools are seeing a lot higher population of our special needs students and our students that are English language learners compared to their geographic and resident districts. That is a structural risk that we cannot control, but it's important to name because with a higher risk and having a higher population with specific needs, it's going to need more support. Network schools, so our schools that have that are not single site operators. So network schools and traditional larger districts have a greater opportunity to hire specialized staffing. While our single site operators rely on one person that wears many hats. That has been a challenge for our single site schools, and we are seeing compliance becoming a large and desktop findings becoming a large issue with our single site operators, particularly in their first year and first few years of operation. There we go. Nope. The slide right here shows really similar data when it comes to special education. The trends are largely the same. The exception is we do have a higher rate of staff turnover. So if you were to look at row 5, I believe it is, and it's blocked on the screen, but it's indicating that almost 50% of our schools had over 50% turnover of special education staff in the school year. It is hard to retain teachers. We are also seeing, and Katie Bridges tomorrow is going to review a couple of other trends that we've seen. We've just seen a higher increase of enrollment of students with more significant disabilities and less applications and higher turnover of those staff, which is simply just a challenge for our schools.
Is that any different than what you're seeing in public schools?
Anecdotally, no. Anecdotally, it is a nationwide. I can't speak to their enrollment numbers. That's something I'm happy to look into, but anecdotally, hiring is just a challenge.
And they're staying in the profession and moving to another school, or they're getting out?
I'm happy to do some research to find you some factual information, but anecdotally is they're burning out and switching lanes. They have a career or not special populations as well. Like that specific area has been hard to retain staff. But again, I'm happy to find some more deep dive into what we're seeing nationwide.
Well, not for me.
Now that you say I'm actually interested too.
I don't need another project, so. Except that, you know, it's easy to pick a piece of data like that.
Yeah.
Point to the charter schools and say they're doing poorly, when they may not be performing any differently than comparable peers that are not charter schools. So it is important for us to know that. I mean, I know. By the way, I believe what you're saying, because I'm seeing it in healthcare too, in certain professions with more difficult populations to care for, particularly mental health. It's really hard to keep. But I don't think it's because they're charter schools.
I think with the level of risk that we're seeing in these areas, it is charter schools must be intentional when it comes to staffing and budgeting needs. With higher areas, specifically students with disabilities, oftentimes you will have to have set aside costs in your budget. You will also have to be incredibly intentional. If you're relying on one person to wear multiple hats, they have to have the specialized knowledge and also the compliance knowledge, and that's really hard to find. That's a unicorn typically. So you have to make really intentional hiring decisions, which gets me to my next point on the next slide of what we're doing with this information. So there's two real areas that we want to walk out of this, walking into the next year thinking through. So the first one is aligning leadership support. My goal is to increase visibility of this data to the leader. So oftentimes our high level leaders aren't traditionally trained in these special populations groups. So when they're getting this information, I want to make sure they know what to do with this. Can they take this information and use it when they're looking at their larger strategic moves, specifically when it comes to the budget hiring process, specifically for our single site operators? Are they able to also manage their teams in response to the data that they're seeing? If they're having low compliance numbers, are they knowing what to do? What are the next steps to be able to support their teams to fix those gaps moving into the next year? The second thing I would like for us to look at is we have seen a great value. Our team has seen great value in moving the needle in our schools when it comes to providing technical assistance. Our schools are all, as Maggie noted, incredibly unique, have very specific models, and have very specific needs, and everything they bring to our desk is nuanced. And so it's really beneficial to have our team protected to be able to do one-off problem solving, training, working, going to school, whatever we can. And so with that in mind, as we're getting larger, we have to refine our system and processes to make sure that we are able to prioritize the hands-on approach that we're doing and able to help give tactical support when it is needed. And so our hope is going into the school year. I listed some of the hurdles we're seeing, but taking you back to the first slide, we've seen a lot of growth. We want to continue on that growth. We want to help our schools. We also want to make sure that the data is getting in the right hands and we are having actions to make sure that we are filling some of the gaps that we're seeing to move into the next year and provide the best support. With that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Maggie's. Okay, thank you all for your attendance and participation at this meeting of the School Performance and Accountability Committee of the Tennessee Public Charter School Commission. At this time, I'd like to ask if there are any final comments. The next meeting of the School Performance and Accountability Committee will be prior to our October 8th, 2026 commission meeting. We have a motion to adjourn. Second. All those in favor? Aye. The ayes have it, and we are adjourned. Thank you.
All right, we're gonna keep going. I got to do a big stack here.
What's that?
We have so much fun with this stuff.
There.
I had to,
Yeah.
I had to call out the next day.
Okay, we're gonna go ahead and get started. Last committee meeting. Welcome to the July 23rd, 2026 meeting of the Rules, Policy, and Governance Committee of the Tennessee Public Charter School Commission. A link has been provided on the commission website for the public. to view this. Please call roll.
Commissioner Levine,
Here.
Commissioner Marino,
Here.
Chair Smith.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have 3 members present. We have 4.
Hayden, on today's agenda, we have several LEA policies, 2 commission policies, and 2 commission rule updates to be presented by General Counsel Ashley Thomas for a vote. Do any commissioners have questions or comments before we vote to approve the agenda? There a motion to approve?
Move.
Second.
Here. Yep. Second.
All opposed, say no. I'm sorry, I have it. They want. They're all the same. Sorry.
Okay, Lauren.
No, I'm getting there. All right, they're approved. The minutes of the committee meeting held April 16th, 2026 have been provided. Does anyone have any edits to make regarding the prior minutes before we proceed? Your motion to approve?
Move. Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Ayes have it, and the minutes are approved. All right, the first item on our agenda today will be a discussion and vote on LEA policy update of first and final reading, as well as final reading on one LEA policy. I'd like to recognize General Counsel Ashley Thomas to describe proposed update.
Thank you, Chair Smith. So just for context, each year the commission staff reviews and updates our LEA policies based on the most recent legislative session, as well as any business practice updates that we need to make. And so we are bringing material changes to those policies for you to review. And so I'm just going to go over those now. There will be a couple that I'll stop on just because they are bigger updates, but of course, at any point, feel free to stop me. So we'll go ahead and get started. So first is LEA policy 1200, which is our grievance and complaints policy. Here we just updated the commission contact information to reflect our complaint form that we've adopted. LEA policy 2700 updates the controlling standard for accounting systems from generally accepted accounting principles to governmental accounting standards board. LEA policy 3202 clarifies the fire drill requirements. LEA policy 4206 is homebound instruction. It updates the homebound placement for students with disabilities to be considered if the student is removed from school for at least 10 consecutive days. LEA policy 4211 updates the access to a system of work-based learning experiences permissive for schools rather than being mandatory. LEA policy 4400 is our instructional materials policy. Here we introduce the language related to the family life curriculum and that attestation form that we developed as a commission. LEA policy 4406 will be the first place where I stop and pause and go into more detail. Is the internet safety policy. This is updated in alignment with the 2026 legislative session. And just some of those updates, our schools have to develop a policy around internet safety and use. They have to include, just for updates, that the technology selected has to prohibit and prevent access to content that is deemed harmful or pornographic or violent or frightening for the age or maturity level of the student. They have to make sure that it prevents access to content that promotes self-harm or is harmful to minors, specifically as defined in the statute. Schools have to develop a policy that has guidelines for effective communication to parents around their internet safety, as well as procedures for responding to violations of that policy. Our schools are now required to evaluate their policies at least twice a year. And then the other big update here is around third-party material that they may outsource. They have to make sure that whatever materials they receive complies with that internet safety policy, that it doesn't violate state law, that it does filter or block those things that I previously named. And then they have to make sure that they have a complaint process that parents can utilize and how they respond to that. That can be folded into the grievance policy that they already have, but they do need to develop that. And then finally, for students in grades pre-K through 5, if our schools develop email addresses, they can only be used as a data point to identify them for security or grading software. But that is 4406.
Can I ask you a question about that one? Section 6. Excuse me, paragraph 6. Where's the in there after D? It says promote self-harm, comma, and.
Yes.
Shouldn't that be or?
So that is written the exact same way that the state law is written. So it says
But does that matter? Hey, are we allowed to go beyond state law with this? Because it seems like it's a pretty steep, it's a pretty high bar to have to hit all four of these. Because like technology that doesn't prohibit pornography or obscene information.
Yeah. If it is the will,
would be permissible.
if it's the will of the committee to change that to where I believe we can do that, I'll double check and make sure and present that tomorrow. I'll research that tonight and make sure that we have the correct language for tomorrow.
I mean, I prefer.
I think that's a very good call out.
So I make that motion to amend that. Is that what you?
Yeah.
How I do that? Okay.
And
move it to amend substitute for and in that section and in under digital or online materials contracted by third party under paragraph 2, they're the same thing.
Okay.
Yep.
Here's a second.
Aye.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Have it.
Sorry, I know I'm making it a little harder.
No, it's completely fine. That is the purpose of this committee. So we'll keep going with the other LEA policy updates. LEA policy 4804 is religion in the curriculum and incorporates.
Just a quick question on the internet safety.
Yes.
Who is the authority that actually deems something harmful to students? Does the head of
Harmful to minors?
Yeah, for example, and I'm just trying to make sure I understand, is there kind of a standard protocol for, is it the head of school that makes that judgment? I mean, it's a passive voice, right? Is deemed harmful to students by the authorized charter school. So I'm just wondering what
The term harmful to minors is specifically defined in state law. And so it lists out what is considered harmful to minors. And so the school policy needs to align that it does not violate that particular definition.
I totally understand that. I'm just wondering who is the controlling authority or who makes the judgment call in the school that in fact is harmful under state law.
Well, currently these policies are developed by our school, so it'd be either the school leader or the governing board that develops that policy.
And the school leader has to kind of sign off on that.
It would be the governing board that would adopt that school's policy. LEA policy 4804 incorporates language updates from the US DOE on religious expressions and protections. LEA policy 5118 introduces requirements on background investigations that our schools have to maintain those background checks as well as the expiration dates of those checks. And it states that the commission may audit that maintenance information, that documentation. LEA policy 6200 is our attendance policy. Here we are adding the requirement that schools must maintain attendance records for the school year, even if a student transfers or withdraws after the start of the school year. Again, all of this is from updates to state law. It requires that a student's unexcused absences be calculated and truancy applied if the student transfers into a TPCSE school. And it requires the school to report a student that would withdraw from a commissioned school and does not enroll in another school. They have to be reported to juvenile court for truancy. LEA policy 6300 introduces language regarding the annual security assessment to be completed by schools. LEA policy 6301 introduces language regarding digital device usage and prohibition. LEA policy 6305 deals with Title IX in our sexual harassment policy. It names that the school level investigations would be the first step upon receipt of a harassment complaint, and introduces notification requirements to the commission and states that the results of a school-based investigation can be appealed to the commission. LEA policy 6309 names the ability for the executive director to modify expulsions related to zero tolerance. LEA policy 6313 is our student discipline policy. Here we are updating to state that the executive director has the authority again to modify those decisions if the suspension results over 10 days, and it requires that the code of conduct include language specific to discipline for students with disabilities. LEA policy 6316 is where I will pause for a deeper discussion. This is our suspension, expulsion, and remand policy. Past this most recent session, permitted the commission to enter into an MOU with geographic LEAs for the provision of support services for, in particular, what we were looking for was support around alternative schools or special population needs. As you know, we do not establish schools, we don't hire staff, but we have schools that have these needs. And so we have begun conversations with Metro Nashville, with Rutherford County, and we currently have an MOU with Memphis Shelby County to enter into an MOU to provide those services. But part of that conversation is, what does that look like for our schools? What is the standard that will allow them access to those alternative schools? And so that requires some collaboration from our schools. All of our schools have their own discipline policy. What is an expellable offense at one school may not be that way at another school. And so we want to set a standard that we know if our schools are going to access this, they've hit that marker. So this initial update reflects that the schools will comply with the terms of the MOU that we are still negotiating. The MOUs will be discussed more in tomorrow's full meeting. But I want to name here that this particular update, this policy may come back to this committee after we have negotiated those MOUs, and we may need to enter new language here. So currently, the updates we have here, we're clarifying the definition of remand to make sure that it's clear for all of our schools that it matches the state definition, that remand specifically means assigning the student to an alternative school. It is more than just expelling the student from the school. It's specifically for use for the alternative school. So we're clarifying that here. We are requiring that the codes of conduct, and again, include language specific to students with disabilities. And we're clarifying our expectations around suspensions and expulsions. Again, we are naming that the executive director has the authority to modify those disciplinary decisions. That comes from business practice over this last year. We've had some cases where students have been sitting out of school as a result of state law that says the receiving district does not have to take the student if they are under an expulsion. So we are naming that in this policy. And then again, like I said, I'm introducing language that says the schools can assign students to an alternative school if we have an executed MOU. So the next LEA policy is LEA policy 6317. We are clarifying that assignment to alternative school is where space is available. And we are stating that schools remain responsible for the provision of IEP services if a student with disabilities is expelled and they cannot attend that alternative school. LEA policy 6505, students in foster care. We are clarifying that students in foster care that are approved by DCS will be enrolled immediately, even if they don't have proof of proper documentation. And we're clarifying where the policy currently says district, we're changing that to commission. LEA policy 6600 is our student records and confidentiality policy. We are aligning updates on categories and surveys, analysis, and evaluations that students are not required to participate in to make our language more closely aligned to federal regulation. And then the final policy here is our communications, news, and media relations policy. It was on first reading for the commission at our April meeting. It should be included in your binders. And you will see that we've gone back, we've talked to our stakeholders again, and we've sort of not necessarily rewritten, but we've made adjustments based on the conversations we've had. So you'll see here, we adjusted some of the language requiring notice to the commission. In the case of an emergency, of course, we want our schools to stabilize their environment first. We're really just trying to highlight where we need to be call number 2 versus just let us know. And then we separated out news and media relations if they are reached out to by the media, how we want to be notified of that, and that we would return the same if we are contacted about their school. And this particular policy would be on final reading, but I defer to Chair Smith if we want to move all of these as a consent agenda to the full commission, or if we need to pull any out for further discussion tomorrow.
I did have on this, I'm sorry, I may be way out of my field on this, and you can slap me down if I am. 3.600,
That's upcoming.
Oh, you haven't gone to it
We
yet?
haven't gotten to that yet.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not.
So you're ahead.
Sir.
We had a couple quick questions. Yes, on the attendance policy 10.6200, kind of back at start for the middle. So it requires a school to report a student who withdraws but does not enroll in another school. So is that a new, like, that feels like a big weight on a school. If the student chooses to leave, they have to be sure they go to another.
So this update is in response to the legislative session. I'm not sure if Hayden has any additional context, but that requirement is now in the law that if a student withdraws from a commissioned school, and I'm assuming the school does not get, doesn't receive communication from a receiving school, that we need records transfer or something like that, and they hit a certain number of absences, they are still obligated to report that student.
Kind of the context from session was this was closing a loophole where some students who had received some sort of disciplinary exclusion from school would then just not enroll, would end up in another school the following year without any sort of record of that disciplinary situation being passed on to the receiving school. This is attempting to close that situation, being able to have.
My other one was on 4 from the bottom, 17.6317. States that schools remain responsible for provision of IP services if the student with disabilities is expelled and unable to attend an alternative school. So if there's not space in an alternative school, you basically cannot expel the student with disabilities, like you still have to provide services.
Yes, so the student, if a student with disabilities is expelled, that school is still responsible for making sure that they receive those special education services while they are sitting at home. And so our policy did not have that language, and so we're introducing that language now.
The school still receive all the funding for that student?
Yes.
Are there any additional questions or comments before we recommend adoption of the LEA policies as a consent agenda on first and final reading to the full commission? We're all okay with consent agenda? Is there a motion?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those say no. Ayes have it. The motion is approved. The next item on our agenda are updates to 2 commission policies. Ashley, you're ready now.
Thank you, Chair Smith. So the first commission policy is Commission Policy 3.010. That is our New Start application policy. This deals with our replication applications. State law changed that a school is eligible to apply for replication if they have been open for 3 years. This is different from when the law first passed that said 1 year. And so the update here is to match state law that now says a school has to be open and operating for 3 years. And so that is the only change to that policy to match state law. Commission Policy 3.600, Dr. Lund previewed this during one of her presentations. This is our renewal policy. This introduces language regarding high-performing charter schools, and so it introduces language of how a school qualifies as a high-performing charter school. And just to quote from state law, a school has met or exceeded standards on at least 75% of the indicators in each section of our framework. In each of the 3 years preceding their renewal, that they've attained a school composite level of above expectations or significantly above expectations on the TBOTS in the 3 preceding school years, and they've had no significant audit findings. If they hit all of those elements, they are considered a high-performing charter school. And so we're introducing language to incorporate that, as well as the new language regarding our site visits and whether or not you get a public hearing during your renewal. If you're a high-performing charter school, it is optional versus being mandatory for other schools. And so those are the updates to the commission policies.
Any questions before voting on these items?
Oh,
Alan?
yes. I'm sorry. Dealing with a problem at home. Yeah, so, yeah, by the way, I completely and totally agree on 3.600. I totally agree with the idea of high-performing charter schools where it says that we shall approve them. But it also says that if they hit at least 75% of the indicators, that sort of leaves us blind as to the 25% they don't meet. And so I guess my question would be this: can it not be that we shall approve them unless 2/3 of the commission wants to raise it for discussion? I think just as opposed to tying our own hand. Am I off base here?
So you're not off base. So you're not off base. However, that's the language of statute. So
yes and no.
So our hands have been tied.
Oh, but we
Yes,
can tie
and
them ourselves.
we did not tie them ourselves. State law has tied us.
The legislature tied our hands. That's exciting. Yes.
I will say overall, we are thrilled to have this provision. It significantly reduces administrative burden for our schools, for us, and we feel confident in our systems that are in place that only the schools that would qualify should be the ones that qualify.
That's really the more important.
And I'll name that this is not specific to commission. This is across charters across the state. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would just add that we were reached out to prior to this bill being filed. We had some input on what those criteria were to become a high performing school, and we felt comfortable that that set a high enough bar.
Answer my question. Thank you.
Any additional questions?
No, not
We have a motion to recommend adoption of commission policies 3.010 and 3.600 on first reading to the full commission.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the motion is approved. Final items on our agenda are 2 commission rule updates. Ashley, right next.
Thank you, Chair Smith. The first commission rule for consideration is the commission's charter school amendment appeals rule. Just for the record, that is rule number 1185-01-01-0.04. We have been in conversation with the State Board of Education around amendment petitions. Currently, all rules around amendment petitions live within the commission rules. However, the actual application of rubric is the responsibility of the State Board of Education. In our conversations with the State Board, we are discussing having anything dealing with the actual petition and that timeline and the initial decision be moved to the State Board, and anything dealing with the appeal would live with us. And so you will see in this red line, what we are suggesting be removed has to deal with submitting an amendment petition, what qualifies for an amendment, the timeline for that amendment. If that amendment for any reason is denied, it still comes to us and is still operated under our rule. We are working with the State Board on timelines, so there's no lapse in rule coverage for the state, but we think that this will just be a cleaner, easier process that people know. Since the State Board is responsible for the application and rubric, it feels like it makes most sense for them to hold the rules, and we will maintain the appeals rule.
Questions? Okay, so we have a motion to recommend adoption of Commission Rule 1185-01-01-0.04 on the first reading to the full commission. Second.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. The rule passes.
And then the second rule are our replication application rules, as we have discussed that we did not receive the positive recommendation from the Government Operations Committee. We are running these rules again. We did have a rulemaking hearing on June 30th. We didn't receive any public comments. So the substance of the rule has not changed, but this is ready for a vote on final reading.
No questions. We have a motion to recommend adoption of Commission Permanent Rule 1185-01-04 on final reading to the full commission. All right, all those in favor. Oh, wait, this is a roll call. Okay, Hayden, will you please call the roll?
Commissioner Levine,
Here, yes.
Commissioner Marino,
Yes.
Chair Smith.
Yes.
Madam Chair, you have 3 ayes.
Thank you, Hayden. And thank you so much, Ashley. Do we have any other conversation?
Yeah, this is a lot of work. Thank you. Thanks, Ashley.
Thank you so much, Ashley, for all your work, and to the rest of the staff for all of your work as well. Thank you all for your attendance and participation at the meeting of the Rules, Policy, and Governance Committee of the Tennessee Public Charter School Commission. At this time, I'd like to ask for any final comments.
Madam Chair, I just want to thank you for the big upgrade in the chair of this committee. Somebody tell Terrence I said.
All right, the next reading of the Rules, Policy, and Governance Committee will be prior to our October 8th, 2026 commission meeting. If there's nothing further, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Great. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, say- Richard?
Get out there.